The blood wouldn't stop. Elena Whitmore knew she was dying the same way she'd known her son was already dead, with the cold certainty that settles into your bones when your body starts giving up. 3 days of labor in a frontier cabin with nothing but her mother-in-law's disapproving silence and a midwife who kept whispering prayers like they were accusations. When the baby finally came, he was blue, perfect, silent. They wouldn't even let her hold him. Cursed, Martha Whitmore had hissed, snatching the tiny body away before Elena's trembling hands could reach him. I told Thomas not to marry you. Your mother died the same way, didn't she? Some women just carry death. Elena had tried to speak, tried to ask for her son, but the room was already spinning. The midwife was packing her instruments with the brisk efficiency of someone eager to leave. Martha stood in the corner cradling the stillborn infant like she was protecting him from his own mother. "Get out," Martha said when Elena could finally stand 3 days later, milk leaking through the front of her dress in dark, shameful stains. "You killed my son's child. You don't belong in this house anymore. Thomas left this house to me when he—" Thomas is dead because he worked himself into the ground trying to provide for a wife who couldn't even give him a living heir. The land goes back to family, real family. Martha's eyes dropped to Elena's chest, to the visible proof that her body was still screaming for a baby who would never need her. "You're an abomination, walking around making milk for a corpse." Elena had left with nothing but the clothes she wore and $11 sewn into her hem. The winter wind cut through her thin coat as she walked the frozen road into town, her breasts aching so badly she wanted to scream. Every step sent jolts of pain through her body. Her son had been buried that morning in ground so hard they'd needed pickaxes. She hadn't been allowed to attend. The town of Salvation Creek didn't want her either. She tried the boarding house first. Mrs. Chen took one look at the milk stains spreading across Elena's bodice and shook her head. "I'm sorry, dear, but the other tenants, they have children. And after what happened, I can't risk—" "Risk what?" Elena's voice came out sharper than she intended. "I'm not contagious. People talk." Mrs. Chen's face softened with pity, which somehow felt worse than hatred. "They say your baby wasn't the first. They say your mother lost 3 before you were born, and your grandmother before that. They say it runs in families, bad luck like that. I have a business to protect." The general store wouldn't extend her credit. The church secretary suggested she try the next town over, maybe find work where people didn't know her story. The restaurant owner offered her washing work, but only during hours when customers wouldn't see her, like shame itself was catching. By the 4th day, Elena was sleeping in the livery stable and binding her breasts so tight she could barely breathe, trying to make her body stop producing what no one needed. The fever started on the 5th day. By the 6th, she couldn't stand without the world tilting sideways. That's when Doc Morrison found her. Christ, girl. He knelt in the hay beside her, his weathered hand cool against her burning forehead. "How long have you been like this?" "Don't know." Elena's teeth were chattering. "Days, maybe. You've got mastitis, infection from the milk." He started unbuttoning her coat with the impersonal efficiency of a man who'd seen every kind of suffering the frontier could offer. "You need to express this or you're going to lose more than your dignity. You might lose your life." "Let me," Elena whispered. Doc Morrison paused, his hands stilling on her buttons. "Let you what?" "Die. Everyone already thinks I'm cursed. Maybe they're right." That's the fever talking. But his eyes were sad. He'd delivered her son. He'd been the one to tell her there was no heartbeat. "I've been a doctor for 30 years, Elena. I don't believe in curses. I believe in bad luck and worse timing and the fact that childbirth kills women every damn day out here. It doesn't mean anything except that the frontier is hard and bodies are fragile. Then why does everyone look at me like I'm poison? Because people are scared of things they can't control. Death, loss, the randomness of who lives and who doesn't." He finished with her coat and started examining her with gentle hands. But being scared doesn't make them right. He treated her there in the stable, showed her how to relieve the pressure, gave her medicine he probably couldn't afford to give away for free. When he was done, he sat back on his heels and studied her face. "I might have work for you," he said carefully, "if you're willing." "What kind of work?" "The kind nobody else wants to do." He paused. "There's a baby dying at my clinic. Rancher's daughter, maybe 6 weeks old. Mother died in childbirth, and the baby won't take a bottle. Won't take formula, won't take cow's milk, won't take anything we've tried. The rancher's been in town for 3 days now, and I've watched that child fade a little more every hour. Elena's breasts ached at the mere mention of an infant. Her body knew before her mind caught up. What are you asking me? I'm asking if you'd consider being a wet nurse. I know it's unconventional given your circumstances. I know people will talk, but that baby needs milk, and you have milk. And I'm watching her die when the solution is right here if anyone had the courage to consider it. People will say I'm trying to replace my dead son. People say all kinds of stupid things. Doc Morrison stood, offering her his hand. The question is whether you can live with yourself if you let another baby die when you could have saved her. Elena took his hand, not because she was brave, but because the thought of her milk going to waste while an infant starved felt like a cruelty she couldn't stomach. If she was already damned in the town's eyes, she might as well be damned for something that mattered. The clinic was a converted house on the edge of town, drafty and understaffed and smelling of carbolic and desperation. Doc Morrison led her through the main room where 2 patients slept, past the cramped office, to a small back room that had probably once been a pantry. Inside, a man sat hunched in a chair beside a wooden cradle, his head in his hands. Mercer, Doc Morrison said quietly, I brought someone who might be able to help. The man looked up, and Elena saw he was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that had forgotten how to hope. His shirt was wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days. When he saw Elena, his gaze dropped immediately to her chest, then jerked away in embarrassment. This is Elena Whitmore, Doc Morrison continued. She recently lost a child of her own. She's still producing milk. I think she might be able to feed your daughter. The man, Mercer, stared at the doctor like he'd suggested something obscene. You want me to hand my baby to the woman everyone says is cursed? Elena flinched but didn't step back. She'd learned not to run from cruelty anymore. It just followed you anyway. I want you to hand your baby to the woman who can save her life, Doc Morrison said, steel in his voice. What people say doesn't mean a damn thing when your daughter is dying, Caleb. You've got maybe 12 hours left, probably less. Caleb Mercer looked at Elena for a long moment. She made herself meet his eyes, even though she wanted to disappear. She could see him weighing his daughter's life against the town's judgment, could see the exact moment desperation won over fear. If I do this, he said slowly, and something happens to her, then you'll have tried everything, Doc Morrison interrupted. But if you don't, and she dies anyway, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you killed your own child because you were too scared of gossip. It was brutal. True. Caleb's face went white. Let me see her, Elena said quietly. Just let me see if she'll latch. If she won't, I'll leave and you'll never have to think about this again. Caleb stood on shaking legs and lifted a bundle from the cradle so small Elena's heart clenched. The baby was wrapped in blankets that swallowed her, her face the color of old wax. She wasn't crying. That was the worst part. Babies that close to death didn't waste energy on crying anymore. Her name is Rose, Caleb whispered, and his voice broke on the word. Elena held out her arms. After a moment's hesitation, Caleb placed his daughter in them. The weight was so familiar it hurt. The tiny head lolling against her arm, the fragile body that felt like it might shatter. Elena's milk let down immediately, soaking through the binding she'd wrapped so carefully that morning. Her body knew what to do even when her mind was still catching up. Do you want me to stay? Doc Morrison asked. No. Elena didn't look up from the baby. Close the door. She heard them leave, heard the latch click. Then it was just her and Rose in the small, cold room. Hey, little one, Elena murmured, sitting carefully in the chair Caleb had abandoned. I know you're tired. I know nothing's worked. But we're going to try one more thing, all right? Rose didn't respond. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. Elena unbuttoned her dress with shaking fingers, unwound the binding that had been cutting into her ribs. The relief was immediate and painful. Come on, sweetheart. Elena guided the baby's face toward her breast, hoping muscle memory would kick in, praying Rose still had enough strength left to try. For a long moment, nothing happened. Rose's mouth touched Elena's skin but didn't open. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. This wasn't going to work. The baby was too far gone, and she was a fool for thinking her cursed milk could save anyone. Then Rose's lips parted. The latch was weak at first, barely a flutter. But then the baby's instincts took over and she began to suck, tentative and desperate. Elena felt the pull and almost sobbed with relief. The baby was drinking, actually drinking. "That's it," she whispered. "That's my girl. You can do this." Rose's breathing steadied. The sucking grew stronger. Color began creeping back into her pale cheeks so slowly Elena thought she might be imagining it. But she wasn't. The baby was getting warmer in her arms, more solid, more alive. Elena sat there for 20 minutes, then 30, watching Rose drink like she'd been starving, which she had been. The baby's eyes fluttered open once, unfocused and dark, before drifting shut again. But she didn't stop feeding. When Rose finally fell away from Elena's breast, milk-drunk and breathing deeply, Elena let herself cry. Quiet tears that dripped onto the sleeping baby's face. This wasn't her son. This wouldn't bring him back. But for the first time since the stillbirth, her body was doing what it was designed to do. For the first time in days, she felt like something other than a walking ghost. The door opened. Caleb stood there, Doc Morrison behind him. "She's feeding," Elena said unnecessarily. They could both see the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, could see the way Rose's chest now rose and fell with steady rhythm. Caleb made a sound Elena couldn't interpret. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside the chair, his hands hovering over his daughter like he was afraid touching her might break the spell. "Is she really—" "She's stronger," Doc Morrison confirmed, his professional mask cracking into something like wonder. "Look at her color. Listen to her breathing. I'll be damned." "Can she do it again?" Caleb looked up at Elena with desperate hope. "Can you feed her again when she wakes up?" Elena looked down at the baby in her arms, at the rancher kneeling beside her like a supplicant, at the doctor who'd given her one last chance to be something other than cursed. "Yes," she said, "I can do it again." What she didn't say, she had no idea what would happen after that, where she would go, what the town would say when word got out, whether Caleb Mercer would even want her near his child once the immediate crisis passed. But Rose was alive. For now, that was enough. Okay. Over the next 3 days, Elena lived in that converted pantry. Doc Morrison brought her meals and clean clothes. Caleb left only to check on his older daughter, who was staying with neighbors in town. Rose fed every 2 hours, growing stronger with each feeding until she was crying lustily and gripping Elena's finger with surprising strength. On the 3rd day, Caleb brought his other daughter to meet them. "This is Lydia," he said, guiding a small girl into the room. She looked about 7, with dark braids and her father's wary eyes. "Lydia, this is Miss Elena. She's the lady who's been helping your sister get better." Lydia stared at Elena with the unsettling directness of children who've learned not to trust easy answers. "Mrs. Patterson said you're the cursed lady. She said your baby died because you're bad." "Lydia," Caleb's face went red. "That's not— we don't talk like that." "It's all right." Elena met the girl's gaze steadily. "Yes, my baby died, that's true. But I'm not cursed and I'm not bad. Sometimes sad things happen and it's nobody's fault." "Then why is everybody scared of you?" Elena glanced at Caleb, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. "People get scared of things that make them sad or confused. Death makes people scared. So sometimes they look for someone to blame because blaming feels easier than accepting that bad things just happen sometimes." Lydia considered this with a seriousness that seemed too heavy for such a small person. "My mama died too, when Rose was born. Is that your fault?" The question was so direct it knocked the air from Elena's lungs. "No, sweetheart. That's not my fault." "Is it my fault?" "Oh, honey, no." Elena reached out instinctively, then stopped herself. She had no right to comfort this child. "It's nobody's fault. Your mama and my baby, sometimes bodies just stop working right, and there's nothing anyone can do." Lydia's lower lip trembled. "I asked God to save Mama. He didn't listen." Caleb made a broken sound and pulled his daughter against his side. For a moment they just stood there, 2 people drowning in grief they didn't know how to share. Rose chose that moment to wake up fussing. Elena shifted her in her arms, preparing to feed her again, when Lydia spoke. "Can I watch?" Caleb and Elena both froze. "Lydia, that's private," Caleb started, but Elena interrupted him. "It's natural," she said quietly. "If you want to see how your sister eats, you can watch." But you have to be very quiet and gentle, all right? Lydia nodded solemnly and climbed onto the chair beside Elena. She watched with rapt attention as Rose latched on and began drinking, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Does it hurt?" Lydia whispered. "A little at first, but it also feels right, like this is what my body's supposed to be doing." "Were you supposed to feed your baby like this?" Elena's throat tightened. "Yes, I was. I'm sorry he died." 3 simple words from a child, and they were more comfort than anything the adults in this town had offered. Elena blinked back tears. "Thank you, Lydia. I'm sorry your mama died too." They sat like that for a while. Caleb standing awkwardly by the door, Lydia perched beside Elena, Rose feeding peacefully. It should have been strange. It was strange. A grieving widow nursing a motherless infant while the dead woman's daughter watched. The whole town would lose their minds if they knew. But in that small room, it felt like the only sane thing Elena had done since her son died. "Mr. Mercer," she said carefully, still looking at Rose, "I need to talk to you about what happens next." Caleb shifted his weight. "I know. Doc Morrison said Rose needs to keep nursing for at least a few more weeks, maybe months. I can pay you. I don't have much, but it's not about money." Elena looked up at him. "It's about the fact that I'm homeless, and you need someone to feed your baby every 2 hours. I can't do that if I'm sleeping in a stable 5 miles from your ranch." The implications hung in the air between them. Caleb's face went through several complicated expressions. "You want to come to the ranch. I want to keep Rose alive. That means being wherever she is." Elena kept her voice steady. "I know it's unconventional. I know people will talk. But we can draw up a contract if you want. Make it a business arrangement. I'll stay until Rose is weaned and then I'll leave. You'll never have to see me again." "The town will crucify us," Caleb said quietly. "The town already thinks I'm cursed. What more can they do to me?" He didn't have an answer for that. After a long moment, he nodded once. "All right, we'll draw up a contract. Doc Morrison can witness it. But I have rules." "Of course. You're there for the baby, only the baby. You don't try to replace my wife. You don't try to mother Lydia unless she asks for it. And if this arrangement becomes a problem, if it causes issues for my daughters, it ends immediately." The words stung, but Elena understood them. He was protecting his family. That's what good fathers did. "Agreed," she said. Lydia looked between them with solemn eyes. "Are you coming to live with us?" Elena met the girl's gaze. "For a little while, yes, to help take care of Rose." "Okay." Lydia nodded like it was decided. "Our house is messy, though. Papa doesn't know how to clean very good." Despite everything, Elena felt her lips twitch. "I think I can handle messy." The contract was drawn up that afternoon. Doc Morrison witnessed it with pressed lips, clearly wanting to say something but holding back. The terms were simple. Elena would reside at the Mercer Ranch for the purpose of nursing the infant Rose. She would be paid $20 a month plus room and board. The arrangement would continue until Rose was weaned or until either party wished to terminate the agreement with 1 week's notice. It was clinical, businesslike. Absolutely nothing about it acknowledged the emotional landmine they were walking into. "You know people are going to lose their minds about this," Doc Morrison said as they signed. "People have already lost their minds," Caleb replied. "At least this way my daughter lives." Elena said nothing. She folded her copy of the contract and tucked it into her bag alongside the $11 that was still her entire fortune. They left town the next morning before dawn, hoping to avoid the worst of the gossip. It didn't work. Mrs. Patterson was up early and saw them loading Elena's meager belongings into Caleb's wagon. By the time they'd driven 3 blocks, curtains were twitching all up and down Main Street. "Here we go," Caleb muttered. Elena sat in the back with Rose sleeping in a basket beside her, Lydia wedged on her other side. She kept her eyes forward and her chin up, even though her hands were shaking. Let them look. Let them whisper. Rose was breathing steadily, her cheeks pink and healthy. That mattered more than public opinion. The ranch was an hour's ride from town, isolated in the way frontier homesteads always were. As they approached, Elena got her first clear view of what she'd agreed to. The house was small but solidly built, though clearly neglected. Shutters hung crooked. The porch sagged. Dead plants littered what had probably once been a garden. Behind the house, A barn leaned slightly to the left, and beyond that stretched empty pastures that should have been full of livestock. "It's worse than I remembered," Caleb said, as if reading her thoughts. "My wife kept things running. I've been trying, but between the baby and the ranch and trying to keep Lydia fed—" He stopped, jaw tight. "I'm doing my best." "I can see that," Elena said quietly. And she could. This wasn't a man who'd given up. This was a man who was drowning and desperately treading water. He helped her down from the wagon, then carried Rose's basket inside while Lydia grabbed Elena's bag. The interior was just as overwhelmed as the exterior. Dishes piled in the sink, laundry stacked on every surface, dust coating the furniture. But underneath the chaos, Elena could see the bones of a good home. High ceilings, big windows, a stone fireplace that probably heated the whole space when someone remembered to tend it. "You'll have the back bedroom," Caleb said, leading her down a short hallway. "It was my wife's sewing room. There's a bed in there and space for Rose's cradle. The door locks if you want privacy." The emphasis on the lock made his meaning clear. This was a business arrangement. She could protect herself from any impropriety, and he could protect his reputation from any suggestion of impropriety. Elena nodded her understanding. The room was small but had a window overlooking what might someday be a garden again. A narrow bed stood against one wall, covered in fabric scraps and half-finished projects. A rocking chair sat in the corner. It smelled like lavender and dust. "I'll clear out my wife's things," Caleb said, voice carefully neutral. "Give me a few hours." "I can help." "No." The word came out sharper than he'd probably intended. He softened it with effort. "I'll do it. You should rest. Rose will wake up hungry soon." He left, closing the door firmly behind him. Elena stood in the middle of her new room, temporary room, she corrected herself, and tried to figure out what she'd just done. She'd moved into a dead woman's house, was sleeping in her sewing room, nursing her infant daughter. The widow and the widower, bound together by necessity and milk and the fragile life of a baby neither of them could afford to lose. The town was going to destroy them for this. Through the thin walls, she heard Caleb in the next room. The sound of drawers opening, the rustle of fabric. Once, a sound that might have been a suppressed sob. Elena sat on the bed and stared at her hands, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Rose woke up crying an hour later, and Elena didn't have time to wonder about anything except keeping the baby fed and warm and alive. That became the pattern. Every 2 hours, Rose demanded food. In between, there were diapers to change and laundry to wash and a house that desperately needed attention. Elena tried to focus only on the baby, like the contract specified, but it was impossible to nurse Rose in a kitchen with a week's worth of dishes piled in the sink. Impossible to change her in a room where dust made her sneeze. Impossible to watch Lydia eat bread and jerky for the third meal in a row without doing something about it. On the second day, Elena made soup. Just simple vegetable soup from the withered vegetables she found in the root cellar and some salt pork from the pantry. But when Caleb came in from the barn and saw the pot simmering on the stove, he stopped in the doorway like he'd seen a ghost. "You didn't have to do that." "I was making some for myself anyway. It's easier to make a big pot." Elena kept her voice neutral, giving him an out. "There's bread too." Lydia helped. Lydia beamed from her seat at the table, flour still dusting her nose. "I needed it." Caleb looked between them, his daughter happy for the first time in weeks, the woman he'd hired calmly stirring soup like she belonged there. Elena could see the war on his face, gratitude fighting with guilt, relief fighting with loyalty to a dead wife who would never make soup in this kitchen again. "Thank you," he said finally. They ate in awkward silence, Rose sleeping in her basket beside the table. It wasn't comfortable, but it was warm food and a clean kitchen and a baby who was thriving, and sometimes that had to be enough. The trouble started on the third day when Agnes Holloway came to call. Elena was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the wagon. She looked up to see a severe woman in black climbing down, her mouth already set in a disapproving line. "You must be the wet nurse," Agnes said, making it sound like an accusation. "I'm Elena Whitmore. Can I help you?" "I'm Agnes Holloway. I was a friend of Rebecca Mercer." She looked Elena up and down with naked disdain. "I heard Caleb had brought someone into the house. I had to see for myself if the rumors were true. If you're here to see the baby, she's sleeping. I'm here to see what kind of woman moves into a dead wife's home before the body's even cold in the ground." Elena felt her spine straighten. The kind of woman who keeps a starving baby alive. If you have a problem with that, you can take it up with Mr. Mercer." "Oh, I intend to." Agnes smiled, and it wasn't kind. "Rebecca was like a sister to me. This house, that baby, they're her legacy, and I won't stand by while some opportunistic widow with a tragic story worms her way into what doesn't belong to her. I'm not worming my way into anything. I have a contract." "A contract." Agnes laughed. "Is that what we're calling it? You're living in her house, wearing her apron, cooking in her kitchen. How long before you're warming her side of the bed, too?" The accusation hit like a slap. Elena's face burned. "How dare you?" "I dare because someone needs to protect this family's reputation. Caleb is grieving and not thinking clearly. But I am. And I'm telling you right now, if you have any decency at all, you'll take your money and leave before you destroy what's left of the Mercer name. The Mercer name will be destroyed if Rose dies of starvation." Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. "I'm keeping that baby alive. That's all I'm doing. If you can't see that, what I see is a woman who lost everything trying to take someone else's life." Agnes stepped closer, voice dropping to something venomous. "You're cursed, Elena Whitmore. Everyone knows it, and now you've brought that curse into this house. Mark my words, something terrible will happen here. And when it does, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who to blame." She climbed back into her wagon and drove off, leaving Elena standing alone in the yard with her heart pounding and her hands shaking. Caleb found her there 20 minutes later, still frozen with Agnes's words echoing in her head. "What did she say to you?" He looked furious. "Nothing that matters." "Elena." He caught her arm gently, turned her to face him. "What did she say?" So Elena told him, all of it. The accusations, the implications, the thinly veiled threat. When she finished, Caleb's jaw was so tight, she thought he might crack a tooth. "I'll talk to her." "Don't." Elena pulled free. "It'll only make it worse. She's grieving your wife. She's scared and angry, and I'm an easy target. Let her have her anger. As long as Rose is safe, that's all that matters." "It matters if she's threatening you." "She's not threatening me. She's threatening your reputation. And maybe she's right. Maybe I should leave before I cause more problems." "You're not leaving." The certainty in his voice surprised them both. "Rose needs you. That's not negotiable." "For how long? Until the whole town turns against you? Until Lydia starts getting bullied at school because of me? Until my daughter is healthy and strong and doesn't need milk anymore. That was the agreement. I don't break my word just because Agnes Holloway has opinions about things that aren't her business." He stalked back toward the barn, leaving Elena alone with the wet laundry and the growing certainty that this arrangement was going to cost all of them more than they'd bargained for. That night, Rose wouldn't stop crying. She'd fed well, her diaper was clean, she wasn't too hot or too cold, but she screamed like her heart was breaking, and nothing Elena did could soothe her. "What's wrong with her?" Caleb stood in the doorway of Elena's room, hair messed from sleep, fear naked on his face. "I don't know. She's not hungry. I've checked everything." "Should I get Doc Morrison?" "And tell him what? That the baby's crying?" Elena bounced Rose gently, desperately. "Babies cry sometimes. There's not always a reason." But Rose's screams were getting worse, and Elena could see Caleb starting to panic. This was how it started. Something small going wrong, people looking for someone to blame. Agnes's words echoed in her head. "You're cursed." "Let me try something," Lydia said from the hallway. They both turned to find her standing there in her nightgown, looking small and serious. "Lydia, go back to bed," Caleb started, but Lydia ignored him. She walked to Elena and held out her arms. "Mama used to sing to her when Rose cried. Can I try?" Elena's breath caught. She looked at Caleb, who looked torn between protecting his daughter from disappointment and hoping anything might work. After a moment, he nodded. Elena carefully transferred the screaming baby to Lydia's arms. The girl settled into the rocking chair, Rose tiny against her chest, and began singing in a thin, sweet voice. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." Rose's cries didn't stop immediately, but gradually they got quieter, softer. By the second verse, she was just whimpering. By the third, she'd fallen silent, her eyes drifting closed. Lydia kept singing, rocking slowly, while Elena and Caleb stood frozen watching her. When the song ended, the room was quiet except for Rose's gentle breathing. Mama used to rock her like this, Lydia whispered. Every night. She said babies just need to know someone loves them. Caleb made a sound like something breaking. He crossed the room and knelt beside his daughters, both of them, and pressed his face against Lydia's hair. You're so good at that, sweetheart, he whispered. Your mama would be so proud. Can Miss Elena tuck me in? Lydia asked. The request hung in the air. Elena started to refuse. It violated the contract, crossed the line Caleb had drawn about not trying to replace his wife. But when she looked at him, he just nodded, exhausted and grateful. So Elena took Lydia's hand and led her back to her small bedroom, tucked her under worn quilts, sat on the edge of the bed like her own mother used to do. Miss Elena? Lydia's voice was very small. Do you think my mama can see us? From heaven? Elena thought about all the platitudes she could offer, all the comforting lies, but this child deserved honesty. I don't know, sweetheart. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think the people we love don't really leave us, even when they die. Do you think she's mad? That you're here instead of her? Oh, so that's what was weighing on this little girl. Elena smoothed Lydia's hair back from her forehead. I think your mama loved you and Rose more than anything in the world. And I think if she could see that you're being taken care of, that Rose is healthy and growing, that your papa is trying his best, I think she'd be grateful, not mad. Even though you're sleeping in her sewing room? Even then. Lydia was quiet for a moment, then, I'm glad you're here, even if other people aren't. Elena's throat tightened. Thank you, Lydia. That means a lot. She left the girl to sleep and returned to find Caleb still in her room, standing over Rose's cradle with an expression Elena couldn't read. She's good with her, he said without looking up. Lydia, with Rose. She's a wonderful big sister. Rebecca used to sing that song. His voice was rough. I haven't heard it since she died. I didn't even know Lydia remembered it. Children remember more than we think. Yeah. He finally looked at Elena. I'm sorry. About Agnes. About all of this being harder than it should be. You don't have anything to apologize for. I do, though. You're helping us, and people are treating you like you're some kind of threat. It's not right. Right doesn't matter much out here. Survival matters. Rose surviving matters. Elena wrapped her arms around herself. Everything else is just noise. Caleb studied her for a long moment. You're stronger than people give you credit for. No, I'm just tired of caring what people think of me. He nodded slowly, like he understood that better than she'd expected. Get some sleep. Rose will be up again in a few hours. He left, and Elena lay down in the narrow bed surrounded by a dead woman's fabric scraps, listening to the baby breathe in the darkness. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Winter was coming again. The same winter that had killed her son, killed Rebecca Mercer, nearly killed Rose. But Rose was alive now, fed and warm and loved by people who would fight to keep her that way. For tonight, that was enough. Elena closed her eyes and let sleep take her, not knowing that tomorrow the town would discover what Caleb Mercer had done. Not knowing that the real fight was only just beginning. Not knowing that saving Rose would require more than milk and determination. It would require Elena to become someone the cursed widow everyone feared could never be. A mother. The first week passed in a blur of feeding schedules and careful avoidance. Elena learned the rhythm of the house. Caleb left before dawn to tend what remained of his livestock, came back for a silent breakfast, disappeared again until supper. Lydia orbited between them like a small moon, drawn to Elena but afraid to get too close, as if affection itself might be dangerous. Rose, at least, was uncomplicated. She ate and slept and grew stronger every day, her cries becoming lustier, her grip on Elena's finger turning fierce. The baby didn't care about contracts or propriety or dead mothers. She just needed milk and warmth, and Elena's body provided both without hesitation. But the house itself felt crowded with things no one would say out loud. Rebecca's things were everywhere, even after Caleb had cleared the sewing room. Her recipe card still sat in a wooden box on the kitchen counter. Her apron hung on a hook by the stove. Her handwriting marked the pages of the household ledger, neat columns tracking expenses that had stopped abruptly 4 months ago. Elena tried not to touch anything that felt too personal, but it was impossible to exist in the space without encountering the ghost of the woman who'd built this life first. On the 8th day, Elena was scrubbing the kitchen floor when Lydia appeared beside her with a question that had clearly been building for a while. "Why are you cleaning? Papa said you're only supposed to feed Rose." Elena sat back on her heels, pushing damp hair out of her face. "Because I can't stand living in filth, and your father's got enough on his shoulders without worrying about whether there's clean dishes for supper. Mama used to do all the cleaning. Papa says he's no good at it." "Your papa's good at plenty of things. Cleaning just isn't one of them." Lydia twisted the hem of her dress. "Are you going to be our new mama?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Elena set down her scrub brush carefully. "No, sweetheart. I'm here to help with Rose, that's all. You already had a mama. A good one, from what I can tell." "Then why do you act like her?" "What do you mean? You cook like she did. You clean like she did. You sing to Rose sometimes when you think nobody's listening." Lydia's voice got very small. "It makes me forget she's gone. And then I remember, and it hurts worse." Elena's chest tightened. She reached for Lydia's hand, half expecting the girl to pull away, but she didn't. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make it hurt. I'm just trying to help." "I know." Lydia squeezed her fingers. "But Mrs. Holloway says you're trying to steal Mama's place. She told Mrs. Patterson at church, and Mrs. Patterson told my teacher, and now everyone at school keeps asking me questions." "What kind of questions?" "If you sleep in Papa's room, if he's going to marry you, if Mama would be sad about you living here." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "I told them you have your own room, and Papa doesn't even talk to you at supper, but they don't believe me. Jenny Morris said her ma said you're a bad woman, and I shouldn't be around you." Elena felt rage rise hot in her throat. Not at Lydia, but at every small-minded gossip in Salvation Creek who thought it was acceptable to poison a child's mind with their own fear and judgment. "Your teacher should be stopping that kind of talk." "Miss Warren tries, but she can't be everywhere." Lydia wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I don't think you're bad. You make Rose happy. You made bread with me. Bad people don't do that, do they?" "No, honey, they don't." "Then why does everyone say it?" "Because people are cruel when they're scared," Elena wanted to say. "Because it's easier to blame someone for tragedy than accept that bad things just happen. Because a widow nursing another woman's baby threatens every certainty they have about how the world is supposed to work." But Lydia was 7 and deserved a simpler answer. "Because they don't know me," Elena said instead. "And people fear what they don't know. But you know me. Your papa knows me. Rose knows me. That's what matters." "I wish Mama was still here," Lydia whispered. "Then you could just be our friend and nobody would be mean about it." Elena pulled the girl into a hug before she could think better of it. Lydia buried her face in Elena's shoulder and cried the way children do when they've been holding something in too long. Elena held her and rocked her slightly and wished the world was kinder to little girls who'd already lost too much. When Caleb came in for lunch and found them like that, he stopped in the doorway. Elena looked up, expecting him to be angry about the boundary she'd just crossed. Instead, he just looked tired. "Lydia, go wash up," he said quietly. Lydia pulled away, scrubbing at her face. "Papa, I didn't mean to bother Miss Elena. You're not in trouble. Go on." After she'd left, Caleb sank into a chair at the kitchen table and ran both hands through his hair. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 8 days. "The school talked to you," Elena guessed. "Mrs. Patterson cornered me at the feed store. Apparently my daughter is becoming confused about Miss Elena's role in our household." His voice dripped bitterness. "She suggested I send Lydia to live with Rebecca's sister in Denver until this unfortunate situation is resolved." "You can't be serious." "Oh, she was dead serious. Said it would be better for Lydia to have a proper female influence instead of—" He stopped, jaw clenched. "Instead of what? Say it." "Instead of a woman of questionable morals who's taking advantage of a grieving family." The words came out flat, like he'd heard them so many times they'd lost the power to shock him. Elena's hands curled into fists. "And what did you say?" "I told her to mind her own damn business, that Lydia's not going anywhere, and if she's got a problem with how I run my household, she can take it up with the sheriff for all I care." He looked up at Elena with something that might have been gratitude or might have been desperation. "I'm making things worse for you. I should have known this would happen. You hired me to save your daughter's life. Everything else is just noise, remember? Noise that's following Lydia to school. Noise that's going to follow Rose when she's old enough to understand it. He stood abruptly pacing. Maybe I should just tell everyone the truth. That this is a business arrangement, nothing more. That you're practically a stranger to me. We both know that won't help. Elena kept her voice level even though her pulse was racing. People don't want truth. They want drama. And a wet nurse contract isn't nearly as interesting as whatever scandal they've invented in their heads. Then what do? We keep going. We keep Rose healthy. We ignore the gossip until it dies down. And if it doesn't die down, if it gets worse, Elena didn't have an answer for that. They both knew it probably would get worse before it got better. That's how small towns worked. A rumor was currency, and right now they were the richest source of speculation in Salvation Creek. Rose's cry echoed from the bedroom, ending the conversation. Elena went to feed her, and Caleb went back outside, and they continued the careful dance they'd been doing since she'd arrived. Close enough to function as a household, far enough apart to maintain plausible deniability. It couldn't last. Elena knew that. But she didn't know how badly it would break until 3 days later when she went into town for supplies. She'd been avoiding Salvation Creek, sending Caleb instead when they needed something. But they were out of flour and sugar and a dozen other necessities, and Caleb had injured his hand fixing a fence that morning. So Elena bundled Rose into a sling against her chest, left Lydia with her father, and drove the wagon to town alone. The general store went quiet when she walked in. It wasn't subtle. Mrs. Chen was mid-sentence with another customer and simply stopped talking. The two women browsing fabric turned to stare. Even Mr. Whitfield behind the counter looked uncomfortable. "Miss Whitmore," he said carefully. "What can I get for you?" Elena set her list on the counter and kept her chin up. "Everything on here, please. Mr. Mercer's account." "I'm afraid I can't extend credit to that account anymore." "What?" "Mr. Mercer's behind on his payments. Has been for months. I've been patient, but with the current situation, I can't justify extending more credit when there's question about the household finances." Translation: people were talking, and Whitfield didn't want to be associated with scandal. Elena felt her face heat. "I have cash." She pulled out the precious dollars Caleb had given her that morning. "Will that work?" "Of course." Whitfield took the money, but his expression said he'd rather not touch it, like her coins might be tainted. While he gathered her order, Elena stood at the counter with Rose sleeping against her chest and felt every eye in the store boring into her back. She caught fragments of whispered conversation. "Living in sin, mark my words." "Poor Rebecca, barely cold in her grave. Heard she's got designs on marrying him once the mourning period's over." Elena gritted her teeth and stared straight ahead. "Don't engage, don't react, get the supplies and leave." But then Agnes Holloway walked in. The older woman took one look at Elena and her expression transformed into something cruel. "Well, if it isn't the usurper herself, bold of you to show your face in town." "I'm just buying supplies, Mrs. Holloway. Supplies for a home you have no right to be in." Agnes moved closer, her voice rising so everyone could hear. "Flaunting that baby like she's yours, like you didn't slither into that house specifically to prey on Caleb Mercer's grief." "I was hired to nurse the baby. That's all." "Is it?" "Because I've heard differently. I've heard you've taken over the cooking, the cleaning, the raising of Rebecca's daughter. I've heard you're playing house with a man who should be honoring his wife's memory." "Mrs. Holloway, I think that's enough." Mr. Whitfield started, but Agnes talked over him. "No, it's not enough. Not when this woman is destroying everything Rebecca built. Do you know what Rebecca was to this community? She taught Sunday school. She organized the church socials. She was a good, decent woman who died bringing a child into this world. And this is how her memory is honored? By bringing in some cursed widow to take her place?" Elena's hands were shaking. Rose started fussing against her chest, picking up on the tension. "I'm not trying to take anyone's place." "Then why are you still there? Why haven't you left that family alone to grieve properly?" "Because Rose needs to eat," Elena's voice cracked. "Because without me, that baby dies. Is that what you want? Another dead child so you can feel righteous about protecting Rebecca's memory? Don't you dare put that on me. I tried to feed Rose myself. I tried everything. You tried for 2 days and gave up. I've been keeping her alive for 2 weeks. Elena was yelling now, months of grief and rage and exhaustion pouring out. "You want to blame me for helping? Fine, blame me. But that baby is alive because I had milk and you didn't. And if that makes me a usurper in your eyes, I'll wear that label proudly. The store had gone deathly silent. Agnes's face was purple with fury. For a moment, Elena thought the woman might actually strike her. Instead, Agnes drew herself up and spoke with icy precision. You'll regret this. Mark my words, Elena Whitmore. You'll regret the day you set foot in that house. She swept out, leaving Elena standing there with her heart pounding and Rose crying against her chest. The other customers were still staring. No one spoke. The judgment in the room was suffocating. Mr. Whitfield cleared his throat. Your order's ready, Miss Whitmore. Elena paid, loaded the boxes into her wagon with shaking hands, and drove out of town with tears streaming down her face. She made it halfway to the ranch before she had to pull over because she couldn't see the road anymore. This was impossible. She couldn't keep doing this. Couldn't keep walking into rooms that went silent. Couldn't keep facing down people who looked at her like she was poison. Couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt when children were turned against her, and her own grief was used as evidence of her unworthiness. Maybe Agnes was right. Maybe she should leave. Rose had settled down and was sleeping peacefully again, her warm weight against Elena's chest, the only thing tethering her to sanity. Elena pressed her face against the baby's head and breathed in that sweet infant smell. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. Stay and destroy your family's reputation? Leave and watch you starve? Rose didn't answer because babies couldn't solve adult problems no matter how much we wanted them to. Elena drove the rest of the way home with no answers, only the sick certainty that something had to change. Caleb was waiting in the yard when she pulled up, his injured hand wrapped in bandages. One look at her face and his expression darkened. What happened? Nothing. Don't lie to me. You're shaking. Elena climbed down from the wagon, handed him Rose, and started unloading supplies without meeting his eyes. Agnes was at the store. She said some things. It's fine. It's not fine. What did she say? The same things everyone's saying, that I'm taking advantage, that I'm dishonoring your wife, that I should leave. Elena grabbed a sack of flour and headed for the house. She's not wrong, Caleb. This isn't working. He followed her inside, still holding Rose. You want to leave? I want to stop making things harder for you and Lydia. I want to stop being the town's favorite scandal. I want... Her voice broke. I don't know what I want anymore. Caleb set Rose in her basket and caught Elena's arm, forcing her to stop. Look at me. She did reluctantly. His dark eyes were fierce. Agnes Holloway is a bitter woman who can't stand that someone else succeeded where she failed. The town is full of people who would rather gossip than help. But my daughter is alive because of you. That matters more than any of their opinions. Does it? Because Lydia's getting bullied at school. Your credit's being cut off. People are treating you like you've committed some crime by trying to keep Rose alive. Elena pulled free. How long before it gets worse? How long before they start refusing to do business with you entirely? Before Lydia has no friends left? Before what? Before they run us both out of town? He laughed, sharp and bitter. Let them try. I'm not sending you away because small-minded people can't see past their own prejudices. You say that now, but when it starts costing you real money, real opportunities, I'll deal with it. How? Elena demanded. How are you going to deal with it when you can't get credit, can't sell your cattle, can't send Lydia to school without her coming home in tears? You're barely holding this ranch together as it is. The words hung between them, brutal and true. Caleb's face went tight. You think I don't know that? You think I don't lie awake every night trying to figure out how to keep from losing everything? His voice was raw. But sending you away doesn't solve that. It just means Rose dies, and I lose the one person who's actually helped this family instead of judging it. I'm making things worse. You're making things different. That scares people. But Rose is healthy, Lydia's laughing again, and this house feels less like a tomb than it has in months. That's not worse, Elena. That's survival. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to think they could weather this storm through sheer stubbornness. But she'd seen how towns worked, how quickly isolation could turn into complete ostracism. What if survival isn't enough? She asked quietly. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. He picked up Rose, who'd started fussing again, and handed her to Elena. She needs to eat. We can argue about the rest later. But they didn't argue later. They fell back into the careful silence they'd been maintaining, moving around each other like dancers who knew the steps but hated the music. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept hearing Agnes's voice, kept seeing the faces in the general store, kept imagining Lydia at school facing questions no 7-year-old should have to answer. Around midnight, she got up and went to the kitchen for water. Caleb was already there, sitting at the table in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much in my head." "Whoa." He gestured to the chair across from him. Elena sat, grateful for the darkness that hid both their faces. Sometimes it was easier to talk when you couldn't see the other person's judgment. "I've been thinking," Caleb said slowly, "about what you said, about making things harder." "Caleb, let me finish." He took a breath. "You're right that this is costing me. Whitfield cutting off my credit isn't the first business I've lost. The bank's been making noise about my loan, and Lydia," his voice caught. "Lydia came home yesterday with mud in her hair because some boys pushed her down and called her sister a bastard." Elena's stomach dropped. "She didn't tell me. She didn't tell me either. I saw it when I was putting her to bed. When I asked, she said it was her fault for defending you to the other kids. That's not... She shouldn't have to defend me. No, she shouldn't. But she is, because she's decided you're worth defending. And I..." He stopped, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, softer. "I'm starting to think she's right." Elena's breath caught. "What?" "You've been here 3 weeks. In that time, Rose has gone from dying to thriving. Lydia's talking about her mother without falling apart. The house is clean, there's food on the table, the garden's being cleared for spring planting." He paused. "I haven't felt this much hope since Rebecca died." "That's just because things are stable. It's because you're making them stable. And I know that's not what we agreed to. I know the contract says you're only here for Rose, but you're doing more than that, and I think you know it." Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "I don't want to replace your wife." "You're not. You couldn't. Rebecca and I, we built this place together, had history. She knew me before I was buried in debt and grief." His voice went rough. "But she's gone, and I'm still here with 2 daughters who need things I can't give them alone. That's not betraying her memory. That's surviving. People will say I manipulated you, that I used Rose to worm my way into your family. People are already saying that. At least this way it would be true." Elena looked up sharply. In the darkness, she could just barely make out Caleb's face. He looked exhausted, scared, hopeful. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. "I'm suggesting we stop pretending this is temporary, that we acknowledge you're part of this household now, and stop trying to apologize for it." He leaned forward. "I'm suggesting that if the town's going to condemn us anyway, we might as well actually build something worth condemning." "Like what?" "Like a family. A strange, cobbled-together, not quite normal family, but a family nonetheless." Elena's throat closed. She'd lost her family when her son died, when her husband's relatives threw her out. The idea of having one again, even this broken, complicated version, was almost too much to hope for. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "Neither do I. But I'm willing to try if you are." Before Elena could answer, Lydia appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Papa? Miss Elena? Why are you awake?" "Just talking, sweetheart," Caleb said. "Go back to bed." "I heard you say family." Lydia's voice was very small. "Are we going to be a real family?" Caleb looked at Elena. Elena looked at Lydia, this brave little girl who'd defended her to bullies and held her baby sister when she cried and never once complained about how unfair her young life had been. "Would you like that?" Elena asked carefully. Lydia nodded, fierce and certain. "I miss Mama, but I like you too. I don't think those things have to be opposites." Out of the mouths of children, Elena thought. This 7-year-old understood what most adults couldn't, that love didn't have to be exclusive, that making room for new people didn't erase the ones you'd lost. "Then yes," Elena heard herself say, "we can try to be a family." Lydia launched herself at Elena, wrapping small arms around her neck. Caleb stood and put his hand on his daughter's back, and for a moment the 3 of them were connected in the dark kitchen of a house still haunted by grief, but beginning to hold something else too. Hope. Fragile and terrifying, but there. The next morning, Caleb announced his decision to deal with the town head-on. He hitched up the wagon and drove to Salvation Creek with Elena and both girls, walking into the church hall where the weekly community meeting was being held. Every head turned when they entered. Caleb ignored the stairs and walked straight to the front where Pastor Williams was moderating a discussion about road maintenance. "I need to say something." Pastor Williams looked uncomfortable. "Caleb, this isn't really the appropriate venue." "It's exactly the appropriate venue, since apparently my household has become everyone's business." Caleb's voice carried through the hall. "I'm here to set the record straight." Agnes Holloway stood up from her seat. "This is highly irregular." "Sit down, Agnes." Caleb didn't even look at her. He kept his eyes on the wider congregation. "Most of you know my wife died 4 months ago. What you might not know is that my infant daughter nearly died too, because she wouldn't take a bottle. Doc Morrison will confirm that Rose had maybe hours left when Elena Whitmore agreed to nurse her." Doc Morrison nodded from his seat near the back. "That's accurate. Miss Whitmore saved my daughter's life. She moved to my ranch under a nursing contract because Rose needed to feed every few hours, and there was no other way to keep her alive. That's the whole story. No scandal, no impropriety, just a desperate father and a woman willing to help when no one else would." "That's not the point," someone called out. "It's about appearances." "Appearances?" Caleb's laugh was sharp. "My daughter was dying, and you're worried about appearances? What would you have had me do? Let Rose starve so you could feel comfortable?" "There were other options," Agnes said coldly. "I offered to try again." "You tried for 2 days and failed. Rose was dying on your watch, Agnes. Elena succeeded where you couldn't, and you've been punishing her for it ever since out of wounded pride." The hall erupted in murmurs. Agnes's face went scarlet. "How dare you?" "How dare I? How dare you?" Caleb's voice cracked like a whip. "You've poisoned this town against a woman who did nothing but help. You've spread rumors that are hurting my daughter at school. You've interfered with my business relationships, all because you can't stand that someone else was able to do what you couldn't." "This isn't about my pride." Agnes's hands were shaking. "This is about honoring Rebecca's memory, about protecting her children from a woman who's trying to replace her." "Elena isn't trying to replace anyone." Lydia's voice rang out clear and fierce. She'd been sitting quietly on the bench, but now she stood up. "She's just helping. She makes Rose feel better, and she helped me when I was sad, and she doesn't pretend to be mama. She just helps." The hall went silent. Every eye turned to this small, determined girl. "Lydia, sit down," Agnes said, but there was less certainty in her voice now. "No." Lydia's eyes were bright with tears, but her voice didn't waver. "You're being mean to Miss Elena for no reason. She's nice and she works hard and she makes Papa smile sometimes, and that's good. Mama would want Papa to smile." "You don't know what your mother would want." "Yes, I do. Mama told me before she died that I had to be brave and help take care of Rose and Papa. She said families help each other. Miss Elena is helping. You're just being mean because you're scared." Out of the mouths of children, Elena thought again. She put her hand on Lydia's shoulder, trying to comfort her, trying to keep her own tears from falling. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should all take a step back." "No." Caleb's voice was firm. "We're not taking a step back. My daughter just said what needed to be said. Elena Whitmore has done nothing but help my family when we were falling apart. If that bothers you, if that threatens your sense of propriety, that's your problem, not ours." "You can't seriously expect us to just accept this arrangement," someone else called out. "I'm not asking for your acceptance. I'm asking you to leave us alone." Caleb looked around the room, meeting eyes one by one. "My household is my business. How I choose to keep my daughters alive and cared for is my business. And if you can't respect that, then I don't need your friendship or your business." He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. "Oh, and Agnes? Stay away from my family. If I hear you've been spreading more rumors or bothering Elena or upsetting my daughters, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly how you nearly let Rose die rather than admit you couldn't save her." He walked out with Elena and the girls following, leaving a hall full of shocked faces behind them. They didn't speak on the drive home. Lydia curled against Elena's side, still crying quietly. Rose slept in her basket, oblivious to the drama. Caleb drove with his jaw set, hands tight on the reins. When they got back to the ranch, Lydia went straight to her room without being asked. Elena started to follow, but Caleb caught her arm. "I meant what I said in there, all of it." "I know." Elena's voice was shaky. "Thank you. But you know that probably made things worse, right? Agnes isn't going to back down just because you called her out publicly. Maybe not, but at least now everyone knows where I stand. He studied her face. Are you sorry I did it? Elena thought about Lydia's brave declaration, about Caleb standing in front of the entire town and defending her, about the way he'd said my household, like she actually belonged there. No, she said quietly. I'm not sorry. Good. Because I'm done hiding. We're a family now, however strange that might look. And families protect each other. He went to check on Lydia, and Elena stood alone in the hallway with Rose in her arms, feeling the weight of what had just happened. They'd burned their bridges, made enemies of half the town, committed to something neither of them fully understood yet. But they'd done it together, and for the first time since her son died, Elena felt like she belonged somewhere. The fallout came swiftly. By the next day, 3 more businesses had refused to serve Caleb. The bank called in his loan, demanding immediate payment he couldn't possibly make. And someone, Elena suspected Agnes, though she couldn't prove it, started a petition to have Lydia removed from school for her own protection. Caleb came home with the petition in his hand and rage in his eyes. They're trying to take Lydia. What? They're claiming our household is morally unsuitable for a child, that Lydia needs to be removed and placed with relatives until proper arrangements can be made. He threw the paper on the table. It's signed by 23 people. Elena felt sick. Can they do that? I don't know. I need to talk to a lawyer. He raked his hands through his hair. But lawyers cost money I don't have. The bank wants $300 by the end of the month, or they're foreclosing. I've got maybe $50 to my name. I have $11. You can have it. Elena, what? We're family, remember? You said it yourself. She met his eyes. We figure this out together. Before he could respond, Lydia came running in from the yard, breathless and excited in a way Elena hadn't seen before. Papa, Miss Elena, come look! They followed her outside to find Doc Morrison climbing down from his wagon, accompanied by 3 other people Elena vaguely recognized from church. Doc, Caleb said warily. What's this about? Doc Morrison looked tired but determined. We're here to help. Martha here brought vegetables from her garden. John's offering to work your north fence this weekend, no charge. And Anne wants to teach Lydia at home until this school nonsense blows over. Caleb stared at them. Why? Because what happened at the church meeting was shameful, Martha said quietly. She was the baker's wife, a woman who'd always been kind to Rebecca. My daughter's alive today because Elena helped deliver her when Doc was out of town last year. I never thanked her properly for that. Figured now was a good time to start. John, a rancher from the next valley over, nodded. And I lost my wife to childbirth 5 years ago. Know what it's like trying to hold a family together alone. If you've found help, good for you. Don't let the busybodies tear you down. Anne, a retired teacher with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked at Lydia. I heard what you said at the meeting, child. You were very brave. I'd be honored to teach you until people come to their senses. Caleb's face went through several emotions before settling on something that might have been hope. I can't pay you. Don't want payment, John interrupted. Want to help. That's what neighbors do. Doc Morrison stepped forward and handed Elena a folded piece of paper. Also, I wrote you a formal testimonial about your character and your competence with Rose. Might help if there's legal trouble. Elena unfolded it with shaking hands. The letter praised her nursing abilities, her dedication to Rose, and concluded with a statement that in his professional opinion, removing her from the household would endanger the baby's health. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. Agnes is rallying her forces. This petition is just the beginning. Doc Morrison's face was grim. She won't stop until she's driven you out or destroyed the Mercer family trying. Then we'll fight, Caleb said. All of us. And so they did. Over the next 3 weeks, battle lines formed in Salvation Creek. On one side stood Agnes and her allies, the church elders, the gossips, the people who valued propriety over compassion. On the other stood a smaller but fierce group who decided that keeping a baby alive mattered more than maintaining appearances. The ranch became a strange kind of fortress. People who supported them would ride out with supplies or help, always after dark to avoid being seen. People who opposed them would send threatening letters or make pointed comments when Caleb came to town. Through it all, life continued. Rose kept growing, hitting milestones that made Elena's heart squeeze. Lydia studied with Anne and seemed almost relieved to be away from school. Caleb worked himself ragged trying to keep the ranch afloat with diminishing resources. And Elena began to realize she was fighting not just for her place in this household, but for something bigger. For the right to build a life that didn't fit anyone's expectations. For the chance to be a mother in ways she'd never imagined. Late one night, she found Caleb in the barn trying to repair a broken wagon wheel by lantern light. "You should be sleeping," she said. "So should you." Rose down? Finally. She fought it tonight. Elena sat on an overturned bucket. "Caleb, I need to tell you something." He looked up, wary. "What?" "I think I'm falling in love with them. Rose and Lydia." The confession tumbled out before she could stop it. "I know that wasn't part of the contract. I know I'm supposed to stay detached, but I can't. They feel like mine now, and that terrifies me." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Does it terrify you because you think I'll take them away?" "It terrifies me because I already lost one child. I don't think I could survive losing two more." Elena's voice cracked. "And this whole situation is so fragile. One wrong move and everything falls apart." "Then we don't make wrong moves." He set down his tools and came to sit beside her. "Elena, I need to tell you something too." "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them. Elena's breath caught. "That's impossible. We barely know each other." "I know you make my daughters happy. I know you've worked harder than anyone I've ever met. I know you're brave and stubborn, and you fight for what matters." He turned to face her. "I know when I see you with Rose, I think about what Rebecca would say. And I think she'd be grateful someone loves our daughter this much." "Caleb, I'm not asking you to love me back. I'm just saying, if we're going to fight this battle, if we're going to rebuild this family, I want you to know where I stand." He reached for her hand carefully, giving her time to pull away. "I want you here. Not just for Rose. For all of us. For me." Elena looked at their joined hands. Caleb's palm was calloused from ranch work, warm and solid. She thought about her dead husband, Thomas, who she'd married because it seemed practical. About her stillborn son, who she'd never gotten to know. About all the versions of motherhood and family she'd imagined that had nothing to do with this strange, painful, beautiful reality. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Me too. What if we can't make it work? What if we can?" Elena leaned her head against his shoulder, and Caleb wrapped his arm around her, and they sat like that in the barn while the horses shuffled in their stalls and the lantern flickered shadows on the walls. Outside, winter was finally loosening its grip. Spring was coming, whether they were ready or not. And in Salvation Creek, Agnes Holloway was planning her next move. The summons came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Sheriff Coleman himself. He looked apologetic as he handed Caleb the official document, but the law was the law. "Town council's calling a hearing," Coleman said, shifting his weight uncomfortably, "about the petition regarding Lydia. They want both of you there, you and Miss Whitmore, Thursday at 10 at the church hall." Caleb's face went dark. "A hearing? Since when does the town council have authority over my family?" "They don't, technically, but they can make recommendations to the county judge. And Agnes has been pushing hard, got the church elders involved." Coleman glanced at Elena, who stood frozen in the doorway with Rose in her arms. "For what it's worth, I think this whole thing's nonsense, but I have to deliver the summons." After he left, Caleb read the document 3 times, his jaw getting tighter with each pass. "They're calling it a moral assessment hearing. They want to question us about the household arrangement, about Lydia's welfare, about—" He stopped, crumpling the paper in his fist. "They're putting us on trial." "Can we refuse to go?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "And give them an excuse to say we're hiding something?" "No, we go. We answer their questions. We show them there's nothing wrong with this household." He looked at her, and Elena saw fear behind the anger. "But you need to be prepared. They're going to try to make you look like some kind of predator." "I know." "They might ask things, personal things. About us. About whether we're—" He stopped, color rising in his face. "Whether we're sleeping together," Elena finished flatly. "I know, Caleb, I'm not naive. I just don't want you blindsided." Elena looked down at Rose, who was dozing peacefully against her shoulder, completely unaware that her entire future hung in the balance. I've been blindsided since the day my son died. I think I can handle a town council. But as Thursday approached, Elena's confidence wavered. She kept imagining standing in front of those stern faces, having to justify her existence in Caleb's house, having to prove she wasn't some manipulative villain. The night before the hearing, she barely slept. Caleb found her at dawn sitting in the kitchen, staring at cold coffee. "You all right?" "No." There was no point lying. "I'm terrified. What if they decide Lydia should be removed? What if they rule that I have to leave and Rose starts failing again? Then we appeal. We fight. We don't just roll over because Agnes Holloway wants to play judge and jury. You keep saying we'll fight, but what if fighting isn't enough?" Elena's voice rose despite herself. What if they've already made up their minds and this hearing is just for show? What if— "Stop." Caleb knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "We don't know what's going to happen, but I promise you this. Whatever they throw at us, we face it together. You're not alone in that room." His certainty should have been comforting, but all Elena could think about was Lydia upstairs sleeping, innocent and trusting, believing the adults would protect her. And Rose in her cradle, too young to understand that people were trying to tear apart the only family she'd ever known. They left the girls with Anne, who'd volunteered to watch them despite the risk to her own reputation. The older woman hugged Elena at the door. "Hold your head high," she said quietly. "You've done nothing wrong. Don't let them make you believe otherwise." The church hall was packed when they arrived. It seemed like half the town had shown up, divided into clear factions. On the left side sat Agnes and her supporters, the church elders, Mrs. Patterson, the Whitfields, and at least a dozen others. On the right sat the smaller group who'd been helping the Mercers, Doc Morrison, Martha, John, and a handful of others. The middle section was filled with people who looked more curious than committed, ready to be swayed either way. Pastor Williams sat at a table in front with 4 town council members. He looked deeply uncomfortable with his role as moderator. Agnes sat in the front row on the left side, her expression triumphant. "Mr. Mercer, Miss Whitmore." Pastor Williams gestured to 2 chairs positioned to face the council like defendants in a courtroom. "Please sit." The formality of it made Elena's skin crawl. This wasn't a friendly discussion. This was an inquisition. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. "We're here today to address concerns that have been raised about the living situation at the Mercer Ranch, specifically as it pertains to the welfare of the minor child, Lydia Mercer. Miss Agnes Holloway has brought forward a petition signed by 23 concerned citizens requesting an assessment of the household." "Concerned citizens," Caleb muttered under his breath. "Mr. Mercer, you'll have a chance to speak. For now, please let Miss Holloway present her case." Pastor Williams nodded to Agnes. Agnes stood, smoothing her black dress with theatrical care. "Thank you, Pastor. I come before this council not out of malice, but out of love for dear Rebecca Mercer and concern for her children." Her voice dripped false sweetness. "Rebecca was my closest friend. I held her hand when she died. I promised her I would watch over her family." "You promised to help them, not destroy them," Doc Morrison called out. "Order," Pastor Williams said weakly. "Miss Holloway, continue. What we have here is a situation that Rebecca herself would find intolerable. Less than 6 months after her death, another woman has moved into her home, taken over her duties, and inserted herself into the most intimate aspects of family life." Agnes's eyes locked on Elena. "Miss Whitmore may claim she's only here to nurse the baby, but we all know it's gone far beyond that. She's cooking, cleaning, raising Rebecca's daughter, acting in every way like a wife except in name." "Because someone had to," Caleb started, but Pastor Williams raised his hand. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Mercer." Agnes continued, gaining momentum. "I've spoken with parents whose children attend school with Lydia. They report that the child is confused, calling Miss Whitmore Mama in front of other students. She's being exposed to an arrangement that no child should witness, a woman living in sin with her father under the guise of employment." "That's a lie." Caleb was half out of his chair. "Lydia has never called Elena Mama, and there's no sin happening in my house." "Please, Mr. Mercer, control yourself." One of the council members, a Dior man named Pritchard, spoke up. "These are serious allegations. They're lies based on gossip and spite." Are they? Agnes turned to face the crowd. Is anyone here willing to testify that they've seen Miss Whitmore acting inappropriately, taking liberties with household management that go beyond her stated role? Mrs. Patterson stood up. I saw her at the general store with the baby in a sling like it was her own child, acting like she had every right to be there. She does have every right, Caleb shot back. Rose needs to stay with her nurse. That's how nursing works. I saw her hanging laundry in the yard, another woman offered. Rebecca's laundry, like she owned the place. Laundry needs to be washed, Caleb's voice cracked with frustration. What was she supposed to do, let it rot? Elena sat silent through the accusations, feeling each one land like a blow. They were twisting everything, every helpful thing she'd done, every moment of normalcy she'd tried to create, into evidence of manipulation and impropriety. What about you, Miss Whitmore? Pritchard leaned forward. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Elena's throat was dry. Every eye in the hall was on her. She could feel Agnes's satisfaction, could sense the crowd waiting for her to stumble. I have a contract, she said quietly, to nurse Rose Mercer. That's what I was hired to do, and that's what I've done. Everything else, the cooking, the cleaning, I did because a household can't function when everyone's drowning in grief and work. I tried to help, that's all. That's all? Agnes laughed. You've wormed your way into every corner of that family. You've made yourself indispensable. And now what? You're hoping Caleb will marry you out of gratitude? Hoping to replace Rebecca permanently? No! The word burst out of Elena before she could stop it. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I know I could never... Her voice broke. Rebecca was Lydia and Rose's mother. I'm just trying to keep Rose alive. By seducing her father? The accusation hung in the air like poison. Elena felt her face burning. I haven't seduced anyone. Mr. Mercer and I have a professional arrangement. Nothing more. Then why are you still there? Agnes pressed. Rose is thriving now. She could take a bottle if you weaned her properly. There's no medical reason for you to remain in that house anymore, unless there's another reason you don't want to leave. Elena looked at Caleb helplessly. They'd known this question was coming, but hearing it out loud still felt like a trap. Miss Whitmore stays because my daughter needs her, Caleb said firmly. Doc Morrison has said repeatedly that changing Rose's feeding routine now could cause setbacks. She's finally healthy. Why would I risk that? How convenient, Pritchard said dryly. The baby's health requires the nurse to stay indefinitely in close quarters with a widower. Surely you can see how this looks, Mr. Mercer. I don't care how it looks. I care about my daughter's survival. And what about Lydia's survival? Agnes jumped in. That child is being raised in a household where the boundaries of proper behavior have been completely erased. She needs a stable, moral environment. Not this sham of domesticity with a woman who isn't her mother pretending to be. Lydia is perfectly fine, Caleb said through gritted teeth. She's happy. She's learning. She's healing from her mother's death at her own pace. Is she? Agnes pulled out a piece of paper. I have a statement here from Mrs. Henderson, who saw Lydia crying at the milliner's shop last week. When asked what was wrong, the child said she felt guilty for liking Miss Whitmore because it meant she was forgetting her mother. Does that sound like a child who's perfectly fine? Elena's heart clenched. She'd known Lydia was struggling with complex feelings, but hearing it used as ammunition like this was devastating. Children grieve in complicated ways, Doc Morrison stood up. Lydia's feelings are completely natural. It doesn't mean she's being harmed by Elena's presence. If anything, having a consistent female caregiver has helped her process her loss. You would say that, Agnes snapped. You're the one who brought this woman into their lives in the first place. I brought her in to save a dying baby, which she did. Everything else is just your imagination running wild because you can't stand that someone succeeded where you failed. The hall erupted in arguments. People were shouting from both sides. Pastor Williams was banging his hand on the table trying to restore order. Through it all, Elena sat frozen, watching her life get picked apart by people who didn't know her, didn't care about Rose, only cared about winning whatever battle they thought they were fighting. Finally, Pastor Williams got control back. Enough! We're here to make an assessment, not to create more chaos. He looked exhausted. I think we need to hear from the person at the center of all this. We need to question Lydia. No. Caleb stood up so fast his chair fell over. Absolutely not. You're not dragging my 7-year-old daughter into this circus. Mr. Mercer, if Lydia's welfare is truly at stake, we need to hear from her directly, Pritchard said. Surely you can see that. What I see is a room full of adults who want to use a grieving child to score points in their petty feuds. The answer is no. Actually, Agnes said smoothly, the answer isn't yours to give. I took the liberty of bringing Lydia here today. She's waiting outside with Mrs. Patterson's daughter. If the council calls for her, she'll have to testify. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Caleb looked like he might commit violence. You brought my daughter here without my permission. I brought her because the truth matters more than your pride. Agnes's smile was sharp. Unless you're afraid of what she might say. It was a perfect trap. If Caleb refused, it looked like he was hiding something. If he agreed, Lydia would be subjected to questioning that could break her. Pastor Williams looked pained. Mr. Mercer, I'm sorry, but I think we do need to hear from Lydia. Just a few simple questions about her daily life. Nothing harsh. You promise? Caleb's voice was dangerous. You promise you won't attack her the way you've attacked Elena? I promise we'll be gentle. Caleb looked at Elena. She gave a tiny nod, though her stomach was churning. They had no choice. Refusing would only make things worse. Fine, Caleb said. But I'm sitting right there with her. They brought Lydia in, and Elena's heart broke at the sight of her. The little girl looked small and scared in her best dress, her braids perfectly done. Probably Agnes's doing. Her eyes found Elena immediately, wide with confusion. Papa, what's happening? It's all right, sweetheart. These people just want to ask you a few questions about living at the ranch. Just tell the truth, okay? Lydia nodded slowly. Caleb settled her in a chair next to his, keeping one hand on her shoulder. Elena could see his knuckles white with tension. Pastor Williams softened his voice. Hello, Lydia. Thank you for coming. We're just going to talk for a few minutes. Is that all right? I guess so. Good girl. Now, can you tell me, do you like living at the ranch? Yes. And Miss Elena lives there too, doesn't she? Yes. She takes care of Rose. Does she do other things besides take care of Rose? Lydia frowned, clearly confused about where this was going. She cooks sometimes, and she helped me fix my doll when the arm came off. Does she tell you what to do, like your mother used to? Sometimes, like if it's bedtime or if I need to finish my vegetables. And how does that make you feel? Okay, I guess. Grown-ups are supposed to tell kids what to do. A few people in the crowd chuckled. Even Pastor Williams smiled slightly. But Agnes wasn't satisfied. May I ask a question? She interjected. Pastor Williams hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead, Miss Holloway. Agnes stood and approached Lydia with false sweetness. Hello, dear. I know this is hard. I just want to understand something. Do you ever call Miss Elena Mama? Lydia's face scrunched up. No, that's weird. She's Miss Elena. You've never gotten confused? Never accidentally called her Mama? No. What about at school? Some children said they heard you. They're lying. Lydia's voice got louder. Tommy Morris said I called her Mama, but I didn't. I told him Miss Elena helps with Rose, and he said that meant she was trying to be our new mama, and I said she wasn't, and he pushed me. Lydia, calm down. I am calm, but everyone keeps saying things that aren't true. Tears were starting now. I don't call her Mama. I miss my real mama, but Miss Elena is nice and she helps, and I don't understand why that's bad. Elena wanted to go to her, wanted to scoop her up and take her out of this horrible room, but she couldn't move, couldn't do anything except sit there and watch this child suffer. Agnes pressed on, merciless. Do you think your mother would be happy about Miss Elena living in your house? Caleb stood up. That's enough. That question is completely inappropriate. I'm just trying to understand Lydia's emotional state. My emotional state is sad, Lydia shouted, tears streaming down her face now. I'm sad because Mama died and everyone keeps asking me questions about it and making me talk about Miss Elena like she's bad when she's not bad. She's nice, and I just want everyone to stop being mean. The hall went silent. Even Agnes looked taken aback by the outburst. Lydia was sobbing now, turning to bury her face against Caleb's chest. Elena couldn't take it anymore. She stood up and walked over, kneeling beside Lydia's chair. Hey, sweetheart. Look at me. Lydia lifted her tear-stained face. Elena wiped her cheeks gently. You don't have to answer any more questions if you don't want to. You've been so brave, but it's okay to be done now. They're being mean to you, Lydia hiccuped. They're saying you're bad and you're not. I know. But what they think doesn't matter as much as what you think, and what your papa thinks, and what Rose thinks, even if she's too little to say it. Elena smoothed Lydia's hair back. We know the truth. That's enough. Is it? Lydia's voice was so small. Because they might make you leave. And then who will take care of Rose? And who will help me with my lessons? And who will... She stopped, lower lip trembling. I don't want you to go. Elena's throat closed. She looked up at Caleb, who was staring at his daughter with an expression of pure anguish. When she looked back at the council, even Pritchard seemed uncomfortable. But Agnes wasn't done. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This child has become inappropriately attached. She's confusing a business arrangement with a family relationship. It's not healthy. She's attached because she's 7 years old, and she's been through hell. Caleb's voice thundered through the hall. Her mother died in front of her. Her baby sister almost died. And yes, she's gotten attached to the woman who's been kind to her through all of it. That's not inappropriate. That's human. It's a sign that boundaries have been violated. The only thing being violated here is my family's right to heal in peace. Caleb was shaking with rage. You want to talk about what's healthy for Lydia? I'll tell you what's healthy. Having food to eat, having clean clothes, having someone patient enough to teach her when school became unbearable because of people like you spreading poison. Elena has given my daughter all of that. What have you given her besides trauma and judgment? I'm trying to protect her. You're trying to punish me for not grieving the way you think I should. For not staying frozen in the moment Rebecca died. For daring to accept help from someone you've decided is beneath your standards. He gathered Lydia against his side. My daughter is loved. She's cared for. She's safe. If you can't see that, then you're blind. Pastor Williams raised both hands. Please, everyone, let's take a breath. This is getting out of hand. It was out of hand the moment Agnes decided to weaponize a child's grief, Doc Morrison called out. Lydia's testimony just proved there's nothing wrong in that household. She's not confused. She's not being harmed. She's just a little girl who misses her mother and appreciates the woman helping her family survive. Hear, hear, Martha added. Several others murmured agreement, but Agnes wasn't backing down. The fact remains that this living arrangement is unseemly at best and potentially harmful at worst. The petition stands. We're asking the council to recommend that Miss Whitmore leave the household immediately and that Lydia be placed temporarily with relatives until Mr. Mercer can demonstrate a stable, appropriate home environment. Absolutely not, Caleb said flatly. You may not have a choice. If the council agrees with the petition, then I'll fight it in county court and federal court if I have to. You are not taking my daughter. Mr. Mercer, Pritchard spoke up. Perhaps there's a compromise. What if Miss Whitmore remained as Rose's nurse but took lodging elsewhere? Surely there's a way to maintain her services without the appearance of impropriety. Rose feeds every 4 hours, including through the night, Doc Morrison said. Having Elena elsewhere is medically impractical. The baby needs her nearby. Then perhaps it's time to wean the baby, Agnes suggested. Rose is what, 3 months old now? Old enough to try a bottle again. And if she refuses, Elena spoke up, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. If we wean her too early and she starts failing again, will you take responsibility for that? Will you be the one to tell Caleb you killed his daughter because you couldn't stand that I was the one keeping her alive? Agnes's face flushed with rage. How dare you suggest ripping a baby from her food source for the sake of appearances? Elena stood up, facing the council directly. You want to know the truth? Fine. Here it is. I love those children, both of them. I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But Rose feels like mine when I feed her, and Lydia feels like mine when she's hurting. And yes, that's complicated and messy, and it probably does violate your sense of proper boundaries. But those children are alive and healthy and loved, and if you take them away from the people caring for them, you're not protecting them. You're destroying them out of spite. The hall erupted again. People were shouting from both sides. Lydia was crying. Rose's distant wail could be heard from outside where Anne must have brought her, sensing something was wrong. Pastor Williams banged on the table repeatedly. Order! We need order! But there was no order to be found. The hearing had devolved into chaos. And through it all, Agnes stood with her arms crossed, looking satisfied. She'd wanted to expose the Mercer household as scandalous, and she'd succeeded. Never mind that she'd traumatized a child and put a baby's health at risk in the process. Finally, Pastor Williams managed to quiet the crowd enough to speak. I think we've heard enough testimony. The council will take a brief recess to deliberate and deliver our recommendation. How long? Caleb demanded. 15 minutes. Please wait outside. Elena, Caleb, and Lydia were ushered into the small yard beside the church. Anne was there with Rose, who was fussing. The moment Elena took her, the baby settled, rooting against her chest. She's hungry, Anne said quietly. I tried to give her a bottle like you showed me, but she wouldn't take it. Of course she wouldn't. Rose had never taken a bottle, not since that first day when Elena had saved her life. Elena looked at Caleb, and they both knew what the other was thinking. If the council ruled against them, this could be the beginning of the end. Lydia was clinging to her father, still hiccuping from crying. Doc Morrison came out and put a hand on Caleb's shoulder. That was brutal. I'm sorry. Did we make it worse? Caleb asked. Losing our tempers in there? You told the truth. That's never wrong. But Doc Morrison didn't sound confident. The 15 minutes stretched into 30, then 45. Elena fed Rose sitting on a bench while Lydia dozed against Caleb's side, exhausted from the emotional ordeal. People filtered out of the church, some giving them sympathetic looks, others openly hostile. Finally, Pastor Williams appeared in the doorway. We're ready. They filed back in. The crowd had thinned somewhat, but the core factions remained. Agnes sat in her front row seat looking like a cat who'd caught a canary. Pastor Williams waited for everyone to settle before speaking. The council has deliberated on the petition brought by Miss Holloway regarding the Mercer household. This is a difficult situation with no easy answers. He paused, looking genuinely troubled. After careful consideration, we've decided we cannot in good conscience recommend removing Lydia from her father's custody. Mr. Mercer has shown himself to be a devoted parent, and Lydia clearly loves her home. Elena felt a rush of relief. But Pastor Williams wasn't done. However, we do have serious concerns about the current living arrangement. The appearance of impropriety, whether or not impropriety is actually occurring, is damaging to all parties involved, particularly the children. Elena's stomach dropped. Here it came. Therefore, the council recommends the following. Miss Whitmore may continue to serve as Rose's wet nurse, but she must either take separate lodging in town and travel to the ranch for feedings, or Mr. Mercer must formalize the arrangement through marriage within 30 days. The hall exploded. Elena couldn't breathe. Marriage? They were being ordered to either separate or marry. Caleb was on his feet. You can't be serious. You're giving me an ultimatum. Marry her or lose my baby's nurse. We're giving you a choice between propriety and continued scandal, Pritchard said sternly. Having an unmarried woman live in your home is unacceptable. Marriage would legitimize the arrangement and end the gossip. Marriage isn't something you order people into like it's a business contract. Neither is living in sin, Agnes said triumphantly. This is more than fair, Caleb. Either marry her and make it proper or stop exposing your daughters to scandal. Those are your options. What if we refuse both? Elena heard herself say. What if I stay exactly as I am and we ignore your recommendation? Then we escalate to the county, Pritchard said coldly. And I assure you, Judge Harrison takes moral turpitude very seriously. He could order Lydia removed from the home. He could rule that Rose must be weaned immediately and placed with a more appropriate family. Is that what you want? No. It wasn't what any of them wanted. Elena looked at Caleb, who looked back at her with an expression she couldn't read. Horror? Resignation? Anger. How long do we have to decide? He asked quietly. 48 hours, Pastor Williams said. After that, we expect a public announcement of your decision. If you choose marriage, we can arrange for the ceremony here at the church. If you choose separation, Miss Whitmore should be moved to suitable lodging by the end of the week. This is insane, Doc Morrison said from the crowd. You're forcing two people to either marry or destroy a household that's finally functioning. How is that protecting anyone? It's protecting the moral fabric of this community, Agnes said. Something that's clearly eroding when widows and widowers can live together without consequence. They're not living together, they're surviving together. But the council had made its ruling. No amount of arguing would change it now. Elena stood there with Rose in her arms, trying to process what had just happened. They'd come here expecting judgment. They'd gotten an ultimatum that could force them into marriage or tear their fragile family apart. Caleb took her elbow gently. "Come on, let's go home." They gathered Lydia and walked out of the church hall into the harsh afternoon light. Behind them, the crowd was still arguing. Agnes was holding court with her supporters, but Elena barely heard any of it. Her mind was stuck on those words: marriage or separation. 48 hours. The ride home was silent. Lydia fell asleep against Elena's shoulder, worn out from crying. Rose nursed and dozed peacefully. Only Caleb and Elena stayed awake, both lost in their own thoughts. When they got back to the ranch, Anne met them at the door. "Well?" "They want us married or separated within 48 hours, Caleb said flatly. "Those are the options." Anne's face went pale. "They can't do that." "They just did." She left shortly after, promising to come back tomorrow to help however she could. Then it was just the four of them in the house that had become both sanctuary and prison. Caleb put Lydia to bed while Elena fed Rose one more time. When she finally laid the baby in her cradle, she found Caleb waiting in the hallway. "We need to talk," he said. They went to the kitchen. Elena made coffee neither of them would drink, just needing something to do with her hands. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "I won't force you into anything. You know that, right? If you want to take lodging in town and keep nursing Rose from there, I'll make it work somehow." "How?" "She feeds 4 times a night. You'd have to bring her to me or I'd have to stay here anyway, and then we're back where we started. Then we refuse. We tell them all to go to hell and we let them escalate. Maybe the county judge will be more reasonable. Or maybe he won't. Maybe he'll do exactly what they threatened. Take Lydia and force Rose to wean." Elena wrapped her arms around herself. "I can't risk that." "Neither can I." Caleb ran both hands through his hair. "So what do we do?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena thought about their conversation in the barn weeks ago, about Caleb saying he was falling in love with her, about her own confused feelings, the way her heart jumped when he smiled, the way she felt safe when he was near, the way she'd started imagining a future that involved more than just leaving when Rose was weaned. But marriage? Marriage wasn't something you did because a town council ordered it. Marriage was supposed to be about love and choice and commitment, not ultimatums and scandal management. "Would it be so terrible?" Caleb asked quietly. "Being married to me?" Elena looked up sharply. "That's not the point, isn't it? Because if we're being honest, we've already been living like a married couple in everything but name. We raise the kids together. We run the household together. We make decisions together. The only thing missing is the legal paper and the vows." "Marriage is more than just legal paper, Caleb." "I know that." He moved closer. "I also know that I care about you, more than I thought I could care about anyone after Rebecca. And I hope, you care about me too." Elena's throat tightened. "Of course I care about you, but caring isn't the same as being ready for marriage. When would we be ready? In a year? 2? 5? Caleb's voice was intense. "The truth is, we might never feel completely ready, but we have 48 hours to decide whether to build something together or watch it all fall apart." "That's not fair. They're forcing our hand." "They are, and it's wrong, but the choice is still ours." He reached for her hands. "I'm not asking you to marry me because the council said so. I'm asking because I want to, because I think we could make this work, because I think we're already halfway there anyway." "What about Rebecca?" The question burst out before Elena could stop it. "What about your wife? Don't you feel like you're betraying her?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "I'll always love Rebecca. She gave me Lydia and Rose. She built this ranch with me. She's part of who I am." He squeezed Elena's hands. "But she's gone, and I'm still here with 2 daughters who need a mother, and a ranch that needs running, and a heart that's willing to try loving again, if you'll let it." "I'm terrified," Elena whispered. "So am I. What if we do this and it doesn't work? What if we get married and realize we made a mistake? Then we'll figure it out, together." He pulled her closer. "But I'd rather risk failing with you than succeed at being alone." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, at the hope and fear warring in his eyes, at the man who'd defended her in front of the whole town, who'd stood beside her through every attack, who'd trusted her with his most precious things. She thought about Lydia sleeping upstairs, who'd begged her not to leave, about Rose in her cradle, who'd survived because Elena had milk and love to give, about the ranch that was starting to feel like home and the life they'd been building brick by brick, whether they admitted it or not. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe they were already halfway there. If we do this, she said slowly, it's not because they're forcing us. It's because we're choosing it. Our choice. Our timing. Not theirs. Agreed. And we do it honestly. No pretending it's just for show. If we're getting married, we're actually getting married. I wouldn't want it any other way. Elena took a shaky breath. Then ask me properly. Not because there's a deadline, not because the town demands it. Ask me because you mean it. Caleb got down on one knee right there in the kitchen, still holding her hands. Elena Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and help me raise these girls and build a life that's ours instead of anyone else's? It wasn't romantic. There were no flowers or rings or candlelight, just two scared, stubborn people in a worn kitchen making a choice that would change everything. Yes, Elena said. I'll marry you. Caleb stood and pulled her into his arms, and Elena let herself be held, let herself imagine that this might actually work. They had 48 hours to plan a wedding and prepare for whatever came next. And in Salvation Creek, Agnes Holloway would soon learn that her ultimatum had backfired in ways she never expected. They told Lydia at breakfast the next morning. Elena had barely slept, her mind churning through doubts and what-ifs, but when she saw Lydia's face light up at the news, some of those doubts quieted. You're getting married? Like a real wedding? Lydia's eyes went wide. A small one, Caleb said carefully. Just with Pastor Williams and a few witnesses, nothing fancy. Can I be there? Please? Elena reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Of course you can be there. You're part of this family. Can I wear Mama's good dress? The blue one she saved for special occasions? Lydia's excitement dimmed slightly, uncertainty creeping in. Or would that make you sad? The question landed hard. Elena glanced at Caleb, who looked equally caught off guard. I think your mama would want you to wear something special, Elena said slowly. And if that dress makes you happy, then you should wear it. It won't make you feel bad that I'm thinking about Mama at your wedding? Elena's chest tightened. This child was trying so hard to navigate impossible emotional terrain, trying to honor a dead mother while accepting a new one, trying to make everyone happy when there was no way to do that perfectly. Lydia, listen to me. Elena moved to kneel beside her chair. Your mama is always going to be part of this family. Always. Wearing her dress doesn't make me sad. It makes me glad that you're remembering her and including her in important things. But won't it be weird, having her dress at your wedding to Papa? Caleb spoke up, his voice rough. Your mama would want us to be happy. All of us. And if that means moving forward while still remembering her, then that's what we'll do. Lydia seemed to accept this, though her face still carried that too serious expression children got when they were thinking about things beyond their years. Jenny Morris said people don't get new mamas. She said once your mama dies, that's it. Jenny Morris doesn't know everything, Caleb said firmly. But is she right? Is Miss Elena going to be my new mama or just Papa's wife? The question hung in the air. Elena and Caleb exchanged glances, neither sure how to answer. Finally, Elena spoke. I think that's up to you, sweetheart. Some children might want to call their father's new wife Mama. Some might not. Both are okay. You get to decide what feels right. Lydia chewed her lip, thinking hard. Can I just call you Elena? Not Miss Elena, just Elena? I'd like that. And maybe sometimes when we're alone, if I feel like it, I could try calling you Mama and see how it feels. Elena's throat closed. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Okay. Lydia seemed satisfied. When's the wedding? Tomorrow morning, Caleb said. We only have 48 hours to decide, remember? We figured we might as well do it quickly. That's really fast. Yeah, well, the town council doesn't believe in long engagements. Lydia frowned. Is that why you're getting married? Because they said you had to? Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Partly, Elena admitted, because lying felt wrong. The council gave us an ultimatum, but we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't want to. We're choosing this, Lydia, choosing each other and choosing to be a family. Okay. Lydia grabbed a piece of toast. I'm going to tell Anne. She'll want to know. After she ran off, Caleb let out a long breath. That went better than I expected. She's scared. She's just hiding it better than we are. Probably. He reached for Elena's hand across the table. You doing all right? You barely touched your food. I'm fine, just thinking. About what? About the fact that we're getting married tomorrow and I don't have a dress or flowers or any of the things people usually have for weddings. We could wait. Push back the timeline, deal with the council's anger. No. Elena squeezed his fingers. I don't want to give them the satisfaction. And honestly, I don't need all that. I just need... She stopped, not sure how to finish. What do you need? I need to know this is real, that it's not just about saving face or protecting the children. I need to know you actually want this. Caleb stood and came around the table, pulling her to her feet. Elena, I've been a widower for 4 months. 4 months. Anyone with sense would tell me it's too soon, that I'm not thinking clearly, that I'm making a mistake. He cupped her face in his rough hands. But I've never been more sure of anything. I want this. I want you. And tomorrow, I'm going to stand in front of whatever witnesses show up and say so. Elena let herself lean into him, let herself believe it might actually work. I don't know how to be a wife. I wasn't very good at it the first time. I don't know how to be a husband to someone who isn't Rebecca. Guess we'll figure it out together. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the kitchen where so much of their strange courtship had unfolded. Then Rose started crying from the bedroom and reality reasserted itself. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Doc Morrison arrived with the marriage license paperwork, looking both pleased and worried. You sure about this? He asked Caleb while Elena was upstairs with the baby. I know the council's pushing, but you don't have to jump just because they said so. I'm not jumping. I'm choosing. Caleb signed the papers with firm strokes. Elena's good for this family. Better than good, and I'd rather marry her on our terms than let Agnes Holloway dictate how we live. Fair enough. Just wanted to make sure. Doc Morrison tucked the license away. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Rebecca would approve. You think so? I know so. She told me once, right before she died, that her biggest fear was leaving you alone with 2 babies and no help. She made me promise to make sure you didn't try to do everything yourself. He paused. I think she'd be relieved you found someone willing to help carry the load. Caleb's eyes burned. He nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. Anne arrived mid-afternoon with a dress for Elena. It was my daughter's wedding dress. She lives back east now and said you should have it if it fits. The dress was simple cream muslin with long sleeves and a high collar. Nothing fancy but clean and whole. Elena tried it on in the bedroom and found it fit reasonably well, maybe a little loose in the waist, but nothing that showed. You look beautiful, Anne said, and meant it. Elena stared at her reflection in the small mirror. She didn't feel beautiful. She felt scared and hopeful and half convinced this was all a dream that would shatter any moment. What if I'm making a mistake? The confession slipped out. What if we marry tomorrow and realize we don't actually know each other well enough? How well did you know Thomas when you married him? Barely at all. Our parents arranged it. And we were strangers who happened to live in the same house. Elena turned away from the mirror. I don't want that again. I don't want to spend years living with someone I can't actually reach. Then don't. Anne started helping her out of the dress. You and Caleb have been through more in 3 months than most couples face in 3 years. You know how he handles crisis. You know how he treats his children. You know he's stubborn and proud and willing to fight for what matters to him. That's not nothing. But what about love, real love, not just gratitude or convenience? Anne gave her a knowing look. You think you're marrying him out of convenience? I don't know what I'm marrying him for. Then figure it out before tomorrow morning, because those vows mean something, and you owe it to both of you to say them honestly or not at all. After Anne left, Elena sat with Rose and tried to sort through her tangled feelings. She cared about Caleb, that much was certain, cared about his daughters, cared about the life they'd been building piece by piece. But was that love, or just shared survival? She thought about Thomas, her first husband. Their marriage had been dutiful and distant. He'd needed a wife to run his household. She'd needed security after her mother died. They'd performed their roles adequately, but never really seen each other. With Caleb, it was different. He saw her grief and her strength and her fear. He didn't expect her to be perfect or pretend she didn't have opinions. He let her help without feeling threatened. He defended her when she couldn't defend herself. That had to mean something. Rose finished nursing and Elena held her close, breathing in that sweet baby smell. "What do you think, little one? Am I doing the right thing?" Rose, naturally, had no opinion. She just yawned and drifted off to sleep with complete trust that Elena would keep her safe. Maybe that was love too. Not the dramatic sweep you off your feet kind, but the quiet, steady kind that showed up every day and did what needed doing. That evening, Caleb found Elena in the garden she'd been slowly bringing back to life. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and pink. Lydia's asleep, Rose too for the moment. He sat on the ground beside her, not caring about the dirt. Tomorrow's going to be strange. That's an understatement. I keep thinking about what I should say. How to explain to people why we're doing this so fast. We don't owe anyone explanations. I know, but they'll ask anyway. He pulled up a weed absently. Doc Morrison said Rebecca would approve. Think that's true? Elena considered it. I didn't know your wife, but from everything Lydia says, she loved you all fiercely. I think if she could see Rose healthy and Lydia laughing again, and you not drowning in grief and work, she'd be grateful to whoever made that possible. Even if that person is sleeping in her sewing room and wearing her apron? Even then. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I loved her. I want you to know that. What Rebecca and I had was real. I know. But it's over. She's gone. And I can't spend the rest of my life being married to a ghost. He turned to look at Elena. I want to be married to you. Actually married, not just legally bound because the town said so. Is that what you want too? Elena thought about Anne's question, about convenience versus choice, about the difference between duty and desire. Yes, she said quietly. I want that too. Even though we're doing it backward, most people fall in love first, then get married. We're getting married first and hoping love catches up. Maybe we're already closer than we think. We just haven't said it out loud yet. Caleb reached for her hand, dirt-stained and work-worn. I'm saying it now. I love you, Elena. Maybe not the same way I loved Rebecca, but real nonetheless. And I hope, it'll grow into something even stronger as we build this life together. Elena's heart was pounding. I love you too. I think I have for a while. I was just too scared to admit it. He leaned in and kissed her then, gentle and careful and full of promise. It wasn't their first kiss. They'd shared a brief, awkward one the night he proposed. But this one felt different. This one felt like a beginning instead of an ending. When they pulled apart, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. We're really doing this. We're really doing this. Think we'll survive the fallout? I think we'll survive anything as long as we're together. It sounded optimistic, maybe even naive, but sitting there in the garden with the sun setting and the house full of sleeping children they both loved, Elena chose to believe it. The wedding was set for 10 o'clock the next morning. They'd decided to keep it small, just Pastor Williams, Doc Morrison, Anne, Martha, John, and a few other supporters. The ceremony would be at the ranch instead of the church, a deliberate choice to claim this marriage as theirs instead of something performed for the town's benefit. Elena woke before dawn with her stomach in knots. She fed Rose, bathed, and dressed in the borrowed wedding dress with shaking hands. Anne arrived early to help with her hair, pinning it up in a simple style. You look like a bride, she said approvingly. I look like someone playing dress-up. That's how everyone feels on their wedding day, even the ones marrying for love. Lydia appeared in the doorway wearing Rebecca's blue dress, which was too big on her but which she'd insisted on wearing. Papa wants to know if you're ready. Almost. Give me 5 minutes. After Lydia left, Elena stood alone in the small bedroom that had been her refuge for months. Soon she'd move to the main bedroom, to Rebecca's side of the bed. The thought made her dizzy. You can do this, she whispered to her reflection. You've survived worse. You can survive getting married to a good man who loves you. When she finally emerged, she found the main room transformed. Someone, probably Martha and Anne working together, had brought wildflowers to fill the house with color. Caleb stood near the fireplace in his best suit, looking nervous and handsome. Lydia sat on a chair holding Rose, who was miraculously not crying. The witnesses stood in a small semicircle. Elena was surprised to see more than expected. Word must have spread because at least a dozen people had shown up, all from the group who'd been supporting them. And then she saw who was standing at the back of the room, and her stomach dropped. Agnes Holloway. The older woman stood with her arms crossed, her expression cold and watchful. She hadn't been invited. But she was here, probably hoping to witness their humiliation or find some reason to object. Caleb saw Elena's face and followed her gaze. His jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. They'd known this wouldn't be easy. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" Elena walked to stand beside Caleb, her heart hammering. He took her hand and squeezed gently. "We're gathered here today," Pastor Williams began, then stopped. "Actually, I think we should acknowledge the elephant in the room first." Everyone shifted uncomfortably. Agnes's eyebrows rose. "This is not a conventional wedding," Pastor Williams continued. "The couple before us have been through tragedy and hardship. They've faced judgment and gossip and cruelty from people who should have been offering support. The town council gave them an ultimatum that no two people should have to face." He looked around the room, his gaze landing on Agnes. "But make no mistake, Caleb and Elena are not marrying because they were forced to. They're marrying because they've chosen each other, because they've built something worth protecting, and because love sometimes grows in the most unexpected circumstances." Agnes made a derisive sound. Pastor Williams ignored her and continued. "Caleb Mercer, do you take Elena Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded wife? To honor her, cherish her, and stand beside her through whatever comes?" Caleb's voice was steady. "I do." "Elena Whitmore, do you take Caleb Mercer to be your lawfully wedded husband? To honor him, cherish him, and stand beside him through whatever comes?" Elena looked at Caleb, at his dark eyes full of hope and fear and determination. She thought about Rose in Lydia's arms, and Lydia watching them with such trust. She thought about the ranch and the life they'd been building, and the future stretching out uncertain but possible. "I do," she said. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Caleb kissed her, and the small group burst into applause. Lydia cheered. Rose started crying. It was messy and imperfect, and exactly what their life together would be. As they pulled apart, Elena saw Agnes turn and walk out, her face twisted with fury. Let her go. Let her stew in her own bitterness. This moment belonged to them. But the celebration was cut short by a commotion outside. Through the window, Elena saw wagons pulling up. Lots of them. People were arriving carrying baskets and bundles, more people than should have known about the wedding. Caleb went to the door and opened it to find Martha's husband leading what appeared to be half of Salvation Creek's population up to the house. "What's going on?" Caleb asked. "Wedding party," the man said simply. "Martha told folks you were getting married today. People wanted to come show support. We didn't invite—" "Doesn't matter. You've been helping folks for years, Caleb. About time folks helped you back." They came bearing food, roasted chickens, fresh bread, preserves, pies. They brought blankets and linens and small gifts. They brought their children and their goodwill and their apologies for not standing up sooner against Agnes's campaign of cruelty. The baker's wife approached Elena with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't say something when people were spreading those lies about you. You helped deliver my daughter, and I repaid you by staying silent when you needed support. It's all right. It's not all right. But I'm here now. We're all here now." More people echoed the sentiment. The feed store owner who'd refused Caleb credit came and apologized, explaining that Agnes had threatened to pull her business if he didn't comply. The woman who'd turned Elena away from the boarding house admitted she'd been scared of losing customers, but realized too late that fear was no excuse for cruelty. Through it all, Elena felt something shifting in her chest. These people weren't perfect. They'd made mistakes, had been swayed by gossip, had let fear guide their actions. But they were here now, trying to make amends, trying to show that Salvation Creek could be better than its worst impulses. Doc Morrison found a moment alone with Elena. "See? I told you Agnes was losing her grip on this town. What changed? Why now? Your testimony at the hearing, Lydia's tears, watching Agnes try to destroy a family for the sake of propriety, it didn't sit right with people." He smiled. "And when Pastor Williams stood up for you this morning, that gave folks permission to do the same. Sometimes people just need someone to go first." As the impromptu reception continued, Elena noticed Agnes hadn't left entirely. She stood near the edge of the property, watching the celebration with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Fury, yes, but also something that might have been grief. Against her better judgment, Elena walked over to her. "You shouldn't be here," Agnes said coldly. "It's my wedding. I can talk to whoever I want. Your wedding, how convenient. Did you plan this from the beginning? Move into his house, seduce him with your availability, trap him into marriage." Elena could have gotten angry, could have defended herself against accusations she'd heard 100 times. Instead, she looked at Agnes and saw a woman drowning in her own pain. "You loved Rebecca," Elena said quietly. "I understand that. And you're angry that I'm here and she's not. I get it. You don't get anything. I lost my son. I know what grief feels like. I know how it can turn into rage when you don't have anywhere to put it." Elena took a breath. "But destroying me won't bring her back, and hurting her children won't honor her memory." Agnes's face crumpled slightly. She was supposed to live. She was healthy and strong, and she was supposed to live. And instead she died, and you get to have everything she lost. "I don't have everything. I have a chance at something new. That's not the same." Elena's voice gentled. "Rebecca's daughters are in that house right now. They're loved and safe and thriving. Isn't that what she would have wanted? She would have wanted to raise them herself. Of course she would have. But she can't. So the question is, do you honor her by trying to destroy the people caring for her children, or do you honor her by supporting them?" Agnes was quiet for a long moment, tears tracking down her weathered face. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know how to let her go." "You don't have to let her go. You just have to make room for what comes next." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was something, a crack in the armor Agnes had built around her grief. She didn't apologize, didn't congratulate them or wish them well, but she nodded once, then turned and walked to her wagon. Elena watched her drive away and felt something release in her chest. Maybe Agnes would never accept this marriage. Maybe she'd spend the rest of her life bitter about how things had turned out, but she'd heard what Elena said, and maybe, someday, that would be enough. Back at the house, the party was in full swing. Someone had brought a fiddle, and people were dancing in the yard. Lydia was running around with other children, laughing and carefree. Caleb stood talking with a group of ranchers, looking more relaxed than Elena had ever seen him. When he caught her eye, he excused himself and came to her side. "Everything all right? I saw you talking to Agnes." "Everything's fine, just clearing the air." "Think she'll leave us alone now?" "I don't know, but I think we'll be okay either way." Caleb pulled her into his arms, right there in front of everyone, and kissed her soundly. The crowd whooped and applauded. Elena laughed against his mouth, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Hello, Mrs. Mercer," he whispered. Mrs. Mercer. The name sent a thrill through her. Not Elena Whitmore anymore. Not the cursed widow everyone whispered about. Elena Mercer, wife and mother and woman who'd survived the worst and come out stronger. "Hello, husband," she whispered back. They danced in the yard as the sun climbed higher. They ate food brought by neighbors who'd finally found their courage. They held their daughters and accepted congratulations and built memories that would last long after the gossip faded. It wasn't the wedding Elena had imagined as a girl. There was no church full of flowers, no elaborate dress, no honeymoon planned. But as she stood there, surrounded by people who'd chosen kindness over cruelty, holding the hand of a man who'd chosen her, she realized she didn't want any of those things anyway. She wanted this. The messy, imperfect, hard-won reality of a family built from grief and need and stubborn hope. And as the afternoon stretched into evening, and Rose needed feeding, and Lydia needed tucking in, and the ranch needed tending, Elena walked into her new life with her eyes wide open. She was Mrs. Mercer now, mother to 2 girls who needed her, wife to a man who loved her. And for the first time since her son died, she felt like she'd found her way home. The guests didn't leave until well after dark. By the time the last wagon rolled away, Elena was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the physical work of the day. It was the emotional weight of it all, the vows, the celebration, the shift from being a temporary arrangement to something permanent. Caleb was putting away chairs while Elena nursed Rose one last time before bed. Lydia had fallen asleep on the sofa, still wearing Rebecca's blue dress, her face peaceful in a way Elena hadn't seen in months. "Should I carry her to bed?" Caleb asked quietly. "Let her sleep a bit longer. She had a big day." He sat down beside Elena, watching Rose nurse with an expression she was learning to read, contentment mixed with disbelief, like he couldn't quite believe their luck was holding. That was something, he said. All those people showing up. I didn't expect it. Neither did I. Thought we'd have our quiet ceremony and that would be it. He paused. Do you think it'll stick? Or will they go back to listening to Agnes once the novelty wears off? Elena shifted Rose to her other side. Some of them will. People are fickle, but I think enough of them meant it that we'll be okay. We don't need the whole town on our side, just enough to not feel completely isolated. You're more optimistic than me. I'm just tired of expecting the worst. It's exhausting. Caleb laughed softly. Fair point. He reached over to touch Rose's small hand, and the baby immediately gripped his finger. She's getting so strong. She is. Won't be long before she's crawling everywhere and getting into trouble. And then we'll have two of them running around causing chaos. The casual way he said it, like their future together was certain, like they'd be raising these girls side by side for years to come, made Elena's chest tight with something that felt dangerously close to happiness. After Rose finished eating and Lydia was carried to bed, Elena stood alone in the hallway facing the closed door of the main bedroom. Her things had been moved in there earlier by Anne and Martha, her few dresses hanging next to Caleb's shirts, her brush sitting on Rebecca's vanity. She'd been avoiding this moment all day. The door opened and Caleb stood there in his undershirt, looking as nervous as she felt. You coming to bed? Yeah, just giving myself a minute. He understood without her having to explain. We don't have to do anything, tonight or any night. We can take this as slow as we need to. I know. But standing there looking at him, at her husband, Elena realized she didn't want to take it slow. She'd spent too much of her life being cautious, protecting herself from hurt. And yes, this was terrifying. But it was also a choice she'd made, and she wanted to fully commit to it. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. What happened next wasn't smooth or practiced. It was awkward and hesitant and colored by the ghosts of other marriages, other losses. But it was also tender and honest and theirs. And when they finally fell asleep tangled together in sheets that still smelled faintly of lavender, Elena felt something settle in her bones. This was real. She was married, she had a family, and maybe, just maybe, she deserved it. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Elena woke early to feed Rose, then started breakfast while Caleb did the morning chores. Lydia would wander down, still half asleep, and they'd eat together like families did. Then Caleb would head out to work the ranch while Elena tackled household tasks with Rose strapped to her chest and Lydia helping or playing or studying with Anne. It should have felt ordinary. In some ways it did. But Elena kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to shatter the fragile piece they'd built. The first test came 3 weeks after the wedding when the bank called in Caleb's loan again. They'd given him an extension after the wedding, probably swayed by public opinion, but now they wanted their money. $300 Caleb still didn't have. Elena found him at the kitchen table late one night, head in his hands, surrounded by papers covered in calculations that didn't add up no matter how many times he tried. How bad is it? She asked. Bad. I can sell off most of the remaining cattle, but that'll barely cover half of what I owe. And then we'll have no livestock left to rebuild with. What about the land? If I can't pay, the bank takes it. We'd have nothing. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Elena. You married me thinking you were getting stability, and instead you got a man about to lose everything. Elena sat down across from him. I married you knowing exactly what I was getting, a stubborn rancher with too much pride and too much debt. That hasn't changed. But now you're stuck with it, stuck with me. I'm not stuck. I chose this. She reached for the papers, studying the numbers. There has to be something we can do, some way to raise the money. Short of finding gold buried in the pasture, I'm out of ideas. Elena's mind raced. $300, an impossible sum, unless... What about Rebecca's jewelry? She asked carefully. Caleb's head snapped up. What? You told me once she had a necklace from her grandmother and earrings from your wedding. If we sold them, absolutely not. Those are for the girls. For when they're older. They won't need jewelry if we lose the ranch. If we have nowhere to live. I'm not selling my dead wife's things to pay off debt. That's... He stopped, jaw tight. No. Find another solution. Caleb, be reasonable. I said no. His voice rose, and from the bedroom Rose started crying. They both froze. Then Caleb stood abruptly. "I'll check on her." He left Elena alone with the impossible numbers and the weight of knowing she'd crossed a line she shouldn't have. When he came back carrying a fussy Rose, his face was calmer but still closed off. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "I shouldn't have suggested it." "You're trying to help, I know that." He handed Rose to her. "But there are some things I can't do. Selling Rebecca's jewelry feels like selling the last pieces of her. The girls should have something of their mother's, even if it means losing their home. I'll find another way." But days passed and no other way materialized. The bank sent increasingly stern letters. Caleb worked himself ragged trying to drum up extra income, but frontier ranching was barely profitable even in good times. Elena watched him deteriorate under the stress and felt helpless. Then Doc Morrison showed up with an unexpected proposal. "I've been talking to some folks," he said, settling into a kitchen chair while Elena poured coffee. "About your situation. There's a group of us who've pooled some money together. Not enough to cover the whole loan, but maybe enough to negotiate better terms with the bank." Caleb looked up from the ledger he'd been staring at. "I can't take charity." "It's not charity. It's neighbors helping neighbors. You do the same for any of us." "I don't have anything to give back." "Sure you do. You've got land that could be productive again with the right investment. You've got experience. You've got a family worth supporting." Doc Morrison pushed an envelope across the table. "There's $150 there. Use it to negotiate with the bank. Tell them you'll pay half now, and work out a payment plan for the rest." Caleb stared at the envelope like it might bite him. Elena could see the war on his face, pride fighting with desperation, independence fighting with the need to protect his family. "Who contributed?" he asked finally. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," Doc Morrison sighed. "Martha and her husband, John from the next valley, Anne, the feed store owner who felt bad about cutting off your credit, a few others. Some people who couldn't give money sent supplies instead. There's a wagon outside with seed for spring planting and tools to replace the ones you sold." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. These people who barely knew them, who'd stood silent through so much of the harassment, were now stepping up when it truly mattered. Caleb's voice was rough. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it. Say you'll stop trying to do everything alone. Say you'll let people help for once in your stubborn life." Caleb looked at Elena. She nodded, giving him permission to accept what his pride wanted to refuse. He picked up the envelope with shaking hands. "Thank you. I'll pay back every penny. Pay it forward instead. Help the next family that's struggling. That's how communities survive." With the pooled money and some hard negotiating, Caleb managed to restructure his loan. It wasn't perfect. The payments would still be tight, but it bought them time. More importantly, it bought them hope. That night, Caleb held Elena close in the dark. "I almost lost everything because I was too proud to ask for help," he admitted. "Too proud to admit I couldn't handle it all alone." We all struggle with that, wanting to be strong enough to not need anyone. But that's not strength. That's just stubbornness. He kissed her forehead. "You tried to tell me, tried to find solutions. And I shut you down because I was too busy protecting the past to see the present clearly. The jewelry thing was, you were right. If it had come to losing the ranch or selling Rebecca's necklace, we should have sold the necklace. I was holding on to symbols when the real legacy, the girls, the land, the life we're building, that was what needed protecting." Elena understood what he was really saying, that he was learning to let go. Not of Rebecca's memory, but of the paralysis that came from trying to keep everything exactly as it had been. That he was choosing their future over his past. It was hard, imperfect work. There were still moments when Caleb would reach for something and realize Rebecca wasn't there. Still times when Lydia would cry for her mother and no amount of comfort from Elena could fill that specific hole. Still, days when Elena felt like an imposter playing at being a wife and mother to children who weren't originally hers. But there were good moments too. Like the morning Lydia came downstairs and casually called Elena Mama while asking for breakfast, not making a big deal of it, just letting the word slip out naturally. Elena's hands had shaken while she scrambled eggs, trying not to cry, trying not to make Lydia self-conscious about the gift she'd just given. Like the afternoon Rose laughed for the first time, a real belly laugh at Caleb making funny faces, and all three of them froze in wonder at the sound. Like the evening they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rose drowsy against Elena's shoulder and Lydia leaning against Caleb's side, and realized they looked like any other family. Felt like one too. Spring came slowly to the frontier, bringing with it mud and new growth and the backbreaking work of planting. Caleb used the donated seed to plant wheat and vegetables. Elena worked the garden, coaxing life from soil that had been neglected too long. Lydia helped where she could, learning to tell weeds from seedlings, learning the rhythms of the land. And Rose grew. By 4 months old, she was a plump, happy baby who smiled at everyone and had learned to roll over. By 5 months, she was sitting up and grabbing at everything in reach. By 6 months, she was eating solid food and sleeping longer stretches at night, which meant the question everyone had been avoiding finally surfaced. Elena was sitting on the porch snapping beans when Caleb brought it up. Rose is doing well on solid food. She is, still nurses, but not as often. Doc Morrison said most babies are fully weaned by a year. Elena's hand stilled. She knew where this was going. That's what I've heard. That was the original contract. You'd stay until Rose was weaned. Caleb sat down beside her, not looking at her. I know things have changed. We're married now. But I want to make sure you're staying because you want to, not because you feel trapped by vows you only took under duress. Elena set down the beans and turned to face him. Do you want me to leave? What? No. But I want to know you want to be here. Caleb, I married you. I chose this. Every day I choose this. Even when it's hard, even when Lydia has nightmares about Rebecca and won't let you comfort her, even when the money's tight and the work is endless and half the town still probably thinks we're scandalous. Even then, Elena took his face in her hands. I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because this is my family now. You're my husband. Those girls are my daughters. This ranch is my home. All of it, the good and the hard and the complicated. I choose all of it. Caleb's eyes were bright. I needed to hear that. I needed to know. Well, now you know. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not. He kissed her there on the porch with beans scattered around them and Rose babbling to herself inside, and Lydia somewhere in the yard playing. It wasn't dramatic or world-shaking. It was just two people recommitting to a choice they'd made, choosing it again because that's what marriage was. Not one grand gesture, but 1,000 small decisions to stay, to fight, to keep building even when it would be easier to walk away. The real turning point came in late summer when Agnes Holloway showed up at the ranch unannounced. Elena saw her coming up the drive and her stomach dropped. They hadn't spoken since the wedding. For all Elena knew, Agnes was coming to cause more trouble. But when the older woman climbed down from her wagon, she looked different, smaller somehow, less certain. Can we talk? Agnes asked without preamble. Elena wiped her hands on her apron. I suppose. They sat on the porch steps, an awkward distance between them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Agnes broke the silence. I was wrong. About you. About this whole situation. Elena waited, not sure what to say. I've spent the past 6 months being angry at you for being alive when Rebecca's not. For having her husband, and her children, and her life. Agnes's voice was thick with emotion. But you were right that day. Destroying you won't bring her back. And I've been so focused on my grief that I forgot what Rebecca would have actually wanted. Which was? For her children to be loved. For Caleb to be happy. For this ranch to thrive. Agnes finally looked at Elena. I saw Lydia in town last week. She was laughing with you, holding your hand, looking more at peace than I've seen since Rebecca died. And I realized, you're not her replacement. You're just the woman who loves her children now, and maybe that's enough. Elena's throat was tight. It's taken me a long time to believe that myself. I can't promise I won't still have days when I resent you, when I see you in Rebecca's kitchen and feel angry all over again, but I'm trying to let that go, to accept that life continues even after loss, that new doesn't erase old. Agnes pulled out a small box from her pocket. I brought something for Rose. It was Rebecca's christening bracelet. I've been holding on to it, but it should go to her daughter, to you, to give to her when the time's right. Elena took the box with shaking hands. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet engraved with Rebecca's initials and birth date. I can't take this. You can. You should. Rose should have something of her mother's, and I need to trust that you'll teach her about Rebecca. that you'll make sure she knows where she comes from. I will. I promise. Agnes nodded once, then stood. I'm not asking to be friends. I'm just asking for a truce. For Rebecca's sake, for the girl's sake. Truce, Elena agreed. After Agnes left, Elena sat holding the bracelet and crying. Not from sadness exactly, but from the weight of it all. The responsibility of raising children who'd lost their mother. The complexity of loving a man who'd loved someone else first. The impossible task of honoring a dead woman while building a new life. Caleb found her like that and pulled her into his arms without asking questions. Sometimes there were no words for what you were feeling. Sometimes you just had to hold each other and trust that understanding would come. By fall, the ranch was showing signs of real recovery. The wheat harvest was modest but successful. The garden had produced enough to can for winter. They'd bought 3 new cows with money earned from selling vegetables at the market. It wasn't prosperity exactly, but it was stability. The kind of slow, steady progress that suggested they might actually make it. Lydia started back at school that September, nervous but determined. She'd grown over the summer, becoming more confident, more willing to stand up for herself. When other children asked about Elena, Lydia told them simply that she had 2 mothers, one in heaven and one at home, and anyone who had a problem with that could talk to her fists. Elena got called in by the teacher twice that first month. I'm not sorry, Lydia said stubbornly after the second incident. Tommy Morris said you weren't my real mama and I punched him. Lydia, we don't hit people. Then what am I supposed to do when they say mean things? Elena knelt down to her level. You tell them the truth, that family comes in all different shapes, that love is what makes someone a mother, not just biology, that you're lucky because you had one mother who gave you life and another who's helping you live it. And if they still don't understand, you walk away because their ignorance is their problem, not yours. But punching feels better. I know. But it gets you in trouble and doesn't actually change their minds. Words are stronger than fists in the long run. Lydia seemed to accept this, though Elena suspected there might be a few more punches before the lesson truly stuck. She was a Mercer through and through, stubborn, protective, quick to fight for what mattered. Rose, meanwhile, was approaching her first birthday. She was crawling everywhere, pulling herself up on furniture, babbling constantly in a language only she understood. She had Caleb's dark hair and Rebecca's blue eyes, and a personality that was entirely her own, demanding, charming, impossible to resist. When she took her first steps in late October, lurching across the kitchen from Caleb to Elena with arms outstretched, they both cried. This baby who'd been hours from death a year ago was now walking, thriving, full of life and possibility. Mama, Rose crowed when she reached Elena, proud of herself. It was the first time she'd said it clearly. Elena gathered her close, overwhelmed by love for this child who'd saved her as much as she'd saved Rose. Because nursing Rose had given Elena purpose when she'd felt purposeless, had given her a reason to keep going when grief threatened to swallow her whole, had led her to this family, this life, this second chance she'd never expected. That's right, baby girl. I'm your mama. Winter came again, but this time Elena faced it without fear. The house was warm and well-stocked. The family was healthy and intact. The ranch had made it through the hardest year and come out stronger. On the anniversary of the day Elena had first arrived, 1 year since she'd nursed Rose in that converted pantry and changed all their lives, they had a quiet celebration. Just the 4 of them, marking the passage of time and the distance they'd traveled. A year ago, I thought my life was over, Elena said as they sat around the dinner table. I'd lost my son, lost my home, lost everything I thought I was supposed to be. And I was so angry. At the world, at myself, at everyone who'd made me feel like my grief was shameful. What changed? Lydia asked. Your sister? Your father? You? Elena smiled. I came here planning to stay a few weeks, earn some money, and move on. I didn't plan to fall in love with all of you. Didn't plan to build a life. Didn't plan to discover that motherhood could look so different from what I'd imagined and still feel exactly right. Caleb reached for her hand across the table. I didn't plan any of this either. Losing Rebecca, nearly losing Rose, bringing in a stranger who became family, but I'm grateful for it. All of it. Even the hard parts that got us here. Are you happy now? Lydia asked Elena directly. Elena considered the question seriously. Was she happy? Not in the uncomplicated way of fairy tales or the way she might have been if her son had lived and her first marriage had been better and life had followed the script she'd expected. But yes, she was happy. The messy, hard-won, grateful for what you have kind of happy that comes from surviving the worst and finding joy on the other side. "Yes," she said, "I'm happy." That night, after the girls were asleep, Elena and Caleb stood in the doorway of Rose's room watching her sleep. The baby was curled on her side, breathing deep and steady, healthy and whole. "Sometimes I can't believe she's the same infant who was dying a year ago," Caleb whispered. "Sometimes I can't believe I'm the same woman who walked into that clinic ready to do anything except keep living." "What would you tell her? That woman from a year ago?" Elena thought about it. "I'd tell her that grief doesn't end, but it changes. That losing one child doesn't mean you can't love other children. That family isn't always what you planned for, but that doesn't make it less real." She leaned against Caleb. "I'd tell her to hold on. That life gets better in ways she can't imagine yet. That she's stronger than she knows. She'd probably tell you to stop being so optimistic. Probably. I was pretty bitter back then. You had reason to be. Maybe. But I'm glad I found reasons not to be bitter anymore." They stood there a while longer, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate losses and built something new from the pieces. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, still moments when the ghosts of the past felt more real than the present. Still times when Elena mourned her lost son, or Caleb mourned his lost wife, or Lydia cried for the mother she'd never get back. But there were more good days than bad now, more laughter than tears, more hope than fear. And that was enough. Elena had learned something crucial over the past year. You didn't have to forget the past to build a future. Didn't have to stop grieving to start living again. Didn't have to be perfect, or have all the answers, or pretend wounds didn't still hurt sometimes. You just had to keep showing up, keep choosing love over fear, keep fighting for the people and the life that mattered. She'd come to this ranch as a broken woman with nothing but milk to give. She'd stayed because an infant needed her. But somewhere along the way, she'd become more than just a wet nurse or a convenient solution to a desperate problem. She'd become a wife, a mother, a woman who'd learned that sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one you lose. That sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most solid foundations. That sometimes being cursed is really just being tested, and passing that test means discovering who you really are underneath all the grief and fear and shame. Elena Mercer, no longer Whitmore, no longer defined by her losses, stood in the doorway of her daughter's room in the home she'd helped save, married to a man she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back, and felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, not the end of hard work or complicated emotions or the occasional doubt, but the deep, abiding certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, that this imperfect, cobbled-together family was hers, that she'd earned her place through love and sacrifice, and the refusal to give up when giving up would have been easier. The woman everyone had called cursed had proven them wrong in the most fundamental way, by surviving, by thriving, by transforming tragedy into purpose and isolation into belonging. And if that wasn't redemption, Elena didn't know what was. She closed Rose's door quietly and followed Caleb to bed, ready for whatever tomorrow brought. Ready to keep building this life one day at a time. Ready to face the future not as a victim of circumstance, but as a woman who'd chosen her fate and fought for it with everything she had. The frontier was still hard. The town still had its gossips. The ranch still required backbreaking work. But Elena faced it all with her family beside her and her head held high. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, that you could lose everything and still find your way home. That home wasn't a place or a person, but a feeling you built through love and stubbornness and refusing to let tragedy define you. And Elena Mercer had finally, impossibly, come home.